Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the April 22nd, 2026 Special City Council meeting discussing finances and the FY27 proposed budget of the Board of Education. Before we get started, at this time I'm going to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilwoman Melly Garthwaite.
Melly Garthwaite at large, present.
Councilman Peter Rivera.
Peter Rivera at large, present.
Councilman Sean Ronan.
Here.
Councilwoman Ann Heffernan is absent. Councilwoman Nancy Tagliatella is absent. Councilwoman Sarah Akbarali.
Councilwoman Sarah Akbarali, 3rd District, present.
Councilman Gary Donovan.
Councilman Gary Donovan, 4th District, present.
Councilman Edward McMillan.
Councilman Edward McMillan, 5th District, present.
Councilwoman Dawn Callahan is absent. Councilwoman Catherine Tucker.
Councilwoman Catherine Tucker, 7th District, present.
Councilman David Beaton.
Councilman Dave Beaton, 9th District, present.
Councilman Ronald Quagliani.
Ron Quagliani, 10th District, present.
And Chairman Christopher Vargo.
Chairman Christopher Vargo, 8th District, present.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we get started for this evening, I would like everybody to please join us in a moment of silence for the passing of Steve Dargan. Before we do that, the mayor has some words that she would like to share.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Councilman Vargo. I know so many of you in this room were friends with Steve, and it's hard to imagine a world without Steve Dargan. He was such a big part of all of our lives. As many of you know, he passed away. I didn't know it was going to be this hard. He passed away this morning after a long battle with cancer, a very courageous battle. I've known Steve for over 30 years, and you know, for those of you who don't know, he was our state representative for 26 years up at the Capitol. When I went up there, I can tell you that everybody had such tremendous respect for him and truly appreciated him, and he did really great work for the state of Connecticut, and he did really great work for the city of West Haven. He also was a volunteer for youth sports for so many years, but most importantly, he was just a friend to everybody. Was so kind, and everybody loved him, and he will surely be missed. Special condolences to Nancy Tagliatella, which is probably why she's not here tonight, because she was one of his caretakers for many years, his neighbor, and took care of him through all of his sickness. So a moment of silence for Steve Dargan, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, before we, why don't you do that?
Yeah.
Clerk is going to read the call.
Notice of special meeting agenda pursuant to Connecticut General Statute, Section 1-225D, governing special meetings of the municipal legislative bodies, and Rule 4.5 of the West Haven City Council Rules of Procedure. Mayor Dorinda Borer has called a special meeting of the West Haven City Council to be held at 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday, April 22nd, 2026, in the Harriet North Community Room, 2nd floor of City Hall, 355 Main Street, West Haven, Connecticut.
Thank you, Stacy. Before we get into the discussion with the Board of Education, we do have a personnel matter that the mayor would like to discuss with the City Council in executive session, which we will do in the side room. May I please have a motion to go into executive session for a personnel matter? First from Councilman Beaton, second from Councilwoman Akbarelli. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The time is 6:36. The council is in executive session. The mayor is invited. All right, everybody, thank you very much for your patience. So tonight we are going to talk about the Board of Education's budgets for upcoming FY27, in addition to where we are for FY26 year to date. Before we get into the superintendent's presentation and the council ask the questions, the mayor did call this meeting, so I'd like to offer her an opportunity to open us up.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to welcome everyone here this evening. Thanks for coming. I know everybody has a great interest in our Board of Education. I just want to point out Andrew, what Andrew's doing here. We've had some trouble with the microphones in our live stream, so we asked him to come because if the live stream doesn't work, then within 2 days we have to publish all of our budget meetings online. So he's not a big television personality. He's just our personality. I'm glad we're getting together as one group, as there has been a lot of anxiety over this budget by all the stakeholders. Me, the mayor, the superintendent, the Board of Education, the council, the family, the taxpayers. But it's very understandable and normal to have angst because there is a lot at stake. The city is managing a $187 million overall budget, serving roughly 55,000 residents. The Board of Education budget is our largest department at $99 million, representing 52% of the total municipal spending. And we have 5,700 students that we all want to make sure receive the quality education each child deserves. And we want to make sure that those who educate them and those who support them have the proper resources and are supported in their jobs. So while there are critical aspects at play, I know I speak for everyone in this room when I say how we all want collectively what's best for the city of our children, the children of our city, and our city as a whole. And the way we get there is walking through and working through a very large-scale budget. And while this budget is the largest, I want everyone to know that we walk through this process with every department. I've met with each department twice. For reference, we have over 40 subdivision budgets with separate budgets at the city. And in addition, there's a water pollution control budget and an Allentown Fire Department budget, which are significant but separate budgets that I meet with those departments as well, and we have cognizance over all of it. I have been meeting with them since January, and then the city council will start their process with their public meetings of all those divisions as well. My point is that every department reviews their budgets with the mayor and the city council, and all of those meetings are public as well. So I don't want you to think that the Board of Education is the only department going through this process, but the reason the Board of Education is first is because, again, it's 52% of the budget, and it drives a big portion of the rest of the decisions that we make. So where do we stand leading up to tonight? There have been many, many, many conversations between myself and the superintendent, and the two of us have tried to work out what the Board of Education needs and what we can afford, and I think after a lot of work together and a lot of ideas and a lot of sharing, we are in a much better place and a good place. The Board of Education voted on a budget back in February, as that is what is required by their rules. But in February, you don't really know where you stand, as you don't have updated budget to actual numbers, and you need to know where you are in real time and how budget and finances are trending before you could figure out where you're going and what you're going to budget for the following year. And the board's finance director has spent a lot of time cleaning up a process throughout this past year, a process that we all can agree needed a little bit of organizing, and it's made a lot of progress. Fast forward to April, the more progress that was made and the more data that was received, it was clear where the board stands. So at that point, I give a lot of credit to Neil and the Board of Education for saying, we think we can find some savings because we have a better handle on what the budget is and where we're trending in specific line items, and we're willing to take it back and revote, a do-over if you will, with more accurate numbers. And that is exactly what they did. And I appreciate the Board of Education for revisiting the budget with updated financial information, making necessary reductions without impacting classroom instruction, no cuts to teachers, paraprofessionals, nurses, administrators, or staff, adjustments achieved primarily through attrition. And there are no cuts to programs or resources, and given what we are seeing across the state of Connecticut, and given the substantial rise we have in the cost of special education, tuition, and transportation, and given what we have with uncertainty in our state numbers, I think I applaud everyone for making creative adjustments. Having said all that, and having reviewed the new adjusted line items, I want to let everybody know that I'm willing to support this new request and funding. I know how critical investing is to every child's education, well-being, and future, and education has always been one of my priorities since I sat on the Board of Education many years ago. So while we will move forward with tonight's budget review, I just wanted to share that with everyone up front. It doesn't mean I don't still have some concerns over the process and the organization of the funding, but I know, again, that Ann is working towards that end, and with the support of Neil and the Board of Education, is getting her arms around organizing the grants, a very complicated budget process that I think we are all here to support those efforts, and we will all continue to work together. With that said, to that end, I'm going to turn it over to the City Council because this is technically their budget meeting. Again, one they have with all departments, as I know they have questions. I just want to point out that sometimes questions can be awkward and sometimes questions can be uncomfortable. But it's these dialogues and an honest self-assessment is what always makes us stronger as a unity together. So when all is said and done with the council, I would also like to make some comments at the conclusion, at the end, and just talk about our path forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our council.
Thank you, Mayor. Superintendent Cavallaro, you have a presentation to give us?
We gotta put your mic.
Neil, can you just
Gotta
turn the mic
put
on?
your mic on. The button.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor made some comments to start the meeting regarding Steve Dargan. For those of you that don't know, I sat on the council for 6 years with Steve, and we've been friends since 1985. And one thing I want to say about Steve is we had disagreements. We were on opposite parties. Steve was a loyal Democrat, as loyal as can be, and really worked hard for the benefit of West Haven. And we agreed on a lot of things. We disagreed on a lot of things, but maybe this is something you should think about. 45 years later, I can't tell you one specific fight we had on the council, but we had so many good times outside of the council. Those are the things that I remember. So again, keep that in mind that, today you guys are councilmen, you guys are in charge of a lot, but 5 or 10 years down from the road, you'll really remember these as good times and the friends you make and I can't say enough about what I learned as a 22-year-old being on the council about government and things in general. But the friends I made, stayed with me to this day, and I'll certainly miss Steve. So that being said, let me start with, I think the mayor summed it up really, really well. We did have some issues. I'm not going to skirt around them. I think Ann, I think sitting through her last presentation, and I don't want to speak for Pete, but I thought it was pretty impressive. I thought she handled it, and I thought we were moving in the right direction. She was there, the mayor was there, and I think that's one of the reasons that we were able to come to some kind of an agreement, because she felt good and I felt good about where we currently stand for this year and where we're going to be for next year. We, believe it or not, we really worked hard. Look, this is a different administration. There are different expectations. We did things differently in the past. We really have worked hard. Ann has worked exceptionally hard. I think she's worked really well with Dave Taylor and Michael Gormany to try to comply with how you guys want your information and how we can get it to you in a timely manner. And Chris, I know you've asked for a lot of things, and we've tried to give it to you pretty quickly. And obviously you're entitled to it, and we want to get you the information, whether it's a contract or whether it's the budget to actual and where we stand and where we're going. And it does look like, and I'll let Ann talk to specifics if you would like regarding this budget, but it does look like with her projections and encumbrances that we are on target to balance our budget this year, which is certainly good news. And I think based on that, that allowed us to plan better for next year. And again, she can talk about that if you have questions regarding specific line items or things like that. That's not my thing. But let me tell you about the process that the mayor talked about and why we were able to reduce our budget. And I believe we handed you the revised bottom line budget. Gave you the specific reductions. And the last part, I'll get to it, it talks about teacher retirements and where we stand with that. And the third page, which I thought was really important, one of our board members had asked for this information. But if you look at where we were with employees, we really have done our best to pare down and work with the enrollment reducing without hurting services, and, you know, cutting back where we can. Again, we did have the benefit of some COVID money, so some positions were certainly added. But if you look at where we were in 21 to 22 with 732 teachers, you know, we're down to 559. I don't think that's too few. I don't think it's too many. But I think we've done a good job of working to, by the way, understanding that that money and those funds weren't going to be there forever. You look at the number of paras, that's down. The administrators are up too, but we actually made swaps with the teachers union on a couple of positions, which you don't need to know the details. And our clerical has been pretty consistent, but over the years that's reduced, and our custodials positions have been reduced. So I thought that was important for you to have, just to show you that, you know, where we can eliminate and where we can pare down without hurting instruction. We've tried our best to do that. I also want to point out, as the mayor said, we all want high quality education, and I'm really, really pleased. You know, we are one of the 33 Alliance school districts, and we chased Meriden, I think, for everything, but they had 5 schools of distinction. We had 4, and I want to say in total of the Alliance districts, there were of the 33, there were 20. So we're doing very well, and we're doing it in our high need areas. So our kids are really making progress, and that's a good thing. And, you know, for those of you that have been to our board meetings, our student reps have been you know, traditionally we've had kids that have been accepted into Ivy League schools, which I'm really proud of. I'm really proud of all of our programs. And again, I'm not going to go through my Board of Ed presentation, but I'm trying to summarize it in my head. Our fine arts programs are great. Those of you that went to the St. Patrick's Day Parade, we won the Best Band Prize. So and everybody knows I'm a sports guy, but I'm just as proud as that. And we do put a lot into our fine arts programs. And Donata, the band director, you know, when I sat down with her and her group at the beginning of the summer, told me that we have the biggest band in the state of Connecticut, and that really makes me happy. You know, those of you that saw the play and have been in our auditorium, our facilities, I think are great. All 9 of our facilities are terrific. You know, our sports teams are always competitive as can be. I'm really proud of the 2 state championships that we just won, and we're going to be honoring our kids shortly with regard to that. We had a great pep rally a couple of weeks ago. So there's a lot of good going on in our school district. And, you know, and I think we do really well. You know, one thing, you know, whether you agree with me or not, I believe that I understand the complexity and the challenges that this town faces better than anybody with regards to finances. I've been here my whole life, sat in your seat, understand that, you know, you just can't have everything and you can't do everything. So we try to do the best with what you give us. We really do, and I think again we've worked closely with the mayor, her administration, to try to tighten things up and to try to look at how we can do things differently. We're open to, I think we've been open to suggestions. I believe her finance department would tell you that, again, has really come in and been a part of that finance team and has done a good job. You know, I believe we need to expand our finance department and make it a little larger, because I think it's a big job for one person, but we'll worry about that later on. So, you see the adjustments. We got the original request down to from, I think it was about 4.7% to 2.5%, which is a $2.3 million increase. And I'll go over how we did that. And, you know, as the mayor said, you know, we are required to submit a budget just like every department head by February 1st. And we do our best at the time to do that. Give you budget actuals, but we do try to keep the board updated and the city updated as to what we're doing. And let me go through them. ACES, for those of you who don't know, is our REST. That's our Regional Educational Authority in this part of the state. They provide a lot of special ed services to our school district. They've been a tremendous partner in a lot of different ventures. In other words, they run some programs in our schools. They provide a lot of services to our kids, and they really do a good job of working closely with Stefania Lowry, who's our pupil service director, and is here tonight if you have any specific questions, because that is, goes without saying. And you guys read about not only West Haven, but special ed is absolutely the biggest challenge in the state to monitor and to control costs. I mean, West Haven is certainly not alone in that dilemma. But Stefania, again, with our partners at ACES, went to them and said, "Hey, look, you guys provide us with a lot of services, and we pay you a lot of money every year. Is there anything you can do?" So they went back and they took a look at what we're paying for a lot of those services, and they said, "We're going to offer you what they called a bundle," and based on the number of kids in the various programs, they showed us a savings of $370,000. So that's the ACES bundle. So that comes off the top. The health insurance rate savings, when we budget in January, and by the way, we use the same third-party insurance advisor that the city does. In fact, they're contracted by the city. I will say this, and I always caution when I give my budget presentation and try to keep the board aware as we hear different things. They recommend it for this Connecticut State Partnership Plan, which is what all of our employees have at both the Board of Ed and the city, a 13.5% rate increase. That's the number they give you in January because they want you to be prepared. They usually budget high. The final adjusted number came in at 10.3%. So that's a $600,000 reduction. Again, a real reduction that, again, you have to. God, I remember days when we were self-insured and it was a crapshoot. We didn't have the money, and we meaning the city and the Board of Ed, we gambled a lot of times. So these are real numbers. The partnership plan is a defined plan. It has worked out really well for the city. We do keep our eye on it because at some point it could become cost ineffective, but right now it's a good plan for us. And the 10.3% rate increase is better than 13.5, and it's a $600,000 savings. The SEED grant, and I'm going to try to explain this, and if I don't, I'm going to call up Stefania. The SEED grant is a special education grant that came about last year. That was to create new programs in special education. We were able to justify that. She created some learning labs. We were concerned about the future of that grant, about whether we'd be eligible for it, if we can apply for it again, if we had to create new programs. And we were kind of reluctant to do that because obviously if you don't, we don't know if we're getting the money, but if we do you create a program and how do you sustain it? The good news is that the money came through and we don't have to create new programs. We can use it to sustain the programs we have. So we can put the $737,000 towards programs we already have and don't have to go out and create new programs, which is, again, it's a good thing for us because if not, we wouldn't have been able to utilize the money. We didn't think we'd be able to utilize the money, so we didn't include it. The next one, BRISC, which is AI should say software. It says IA, which I thought was really interesting. Several weeks back, our administrative team had a really interesting workshop on AI and how you use it in the classroom, and we're exploring that like other districts, and we're trying to utilize it and figure out how we can do it, but still get kids to be good thinkers and good writers and whatnot. And we were going to purchase some software, which we thought was really important because it's something we felt we need to be more active in. And the presenter of the workshop says you don't need to buy any software. There are so many free things that are out there. Take advantage of them first. So that's that saving. Again, not a great deal, but it's $37,000 that, if we don't need to spend, we won't. We currently, with Bridges, we currently use Bridges and Cornell Scott Hill Health Center to service our kids. Because Cornell Hill Health is federally funded, we don't pay a fee for them, whereas Bridges covers the insurance, and if I'm saying this right, Steph, but we would have to pay the difference. So we are just going to use, in the future, we'll just use Cornell Hill Scott. We still have our school-based health centers, which we have at the high school, the middle school, and we're trying to expand to some of our elementary schools, and that's been really well. So we can recommend and place students where they need to be. One of the biggest challenges with that is not so much placing them or getting them contact, it's getting the families to follow through and to take advantage of the services. So we believe that by just utilizing Cornell Scott, we can save that money and not use Bridges, because Bridges, again, they bill us for what insurance doesn't cover, but Hill Health is federally funded, so they get the money. Bilingual tutors, those are currently open positions now, and I know we're here, and you've heard me say many, many times, for those of you who've been around, how challenging it is to keep servicing our growing non-English speaking population. But frankly, those jobs are so difficult to retain people because they're in such high demand, and they're not full-time jobs. We believe that where there are not as many kids that need services, we can reassign the ones that we have and still cover our needs. The last grouping are our teacher retirements and replacements. And what we do is, normally when we do our budget in January, we kind of look back and see what's the number of people that retire or leave us, and we put a number in, and we also included this year in eliminating some positions, because we felt that with lower enrollment, if we got the number of retirements, or teachers do leave, we would be able to save some money. The good news is we've exceeded what we normally get for retirements at this time of year. That's a good thing. I'm going to caution you guys at the end about why why we're conservative here. But we did have 7 teachers that retired, which as of now is pretty good. There's still a couple of months to make that call. And we didn't think there'd be a lot this year, because we're in the second year of a third-year contract, and we thought that many teachers would wait for this contract to expire, because there's a 4% raise next year. So, take the 4%, work the extra year, and that obviously helps build your retirement. But we've got 7 so far and 2 teacher resignations. The paraprofessional resignation, the reason we included that this year is because due to our low enrollment, and again, I want to talk to you guys about that in a minute before we even talk about the budget, more about the budget. We believe that we can eliminate, based on enrollment, a kindergarten at Forest Elementary School. Our kindergartens have a para. It's an open job. No one's losing their job. We just don't have to replace that job because we're not having the kindergarten classroom there. So that gives you a total of, and again, follow me, and if you have questions, don't hesitate to interrupt me, a total savings of $870,000 roughly. Now, part of any retiree package is that we do pay out longtime employees who've worked so many years that qualify. I believe we pay it based on sick time available. That is, and again, these are real as of today. They can change. Again, if we get more, there could be more savings. That's about $85,000, so you take that off the top, that gives you $784,000 savings. Now, what we did was, we are replacing several of the positions, not all of them. We probably can replace more than what we had anticipated because of that number. We figured our low-step teacher with a bachelor's degree is $45,000. Very rarely do teachers come out certified anymore with just a bachelor's. Most of them go through a master's program, and I figured I didn't want to start at the lowest step, so go up a step. That's the $53,000. Now, that's fairly easy to do if they're elementary positions, and most of them are in this case. So we should be able to replace them at that rate. And even if we hire teachers early in some of the shortage areas and the secondary areas, you get them at a lower salary. So to replace the staff, you got to add that money back, and that gives you a subtotal of $527,000. And again, what we already included in our original budget was $360,000, so that gives you a total savings of $167,000. Now, the one thing, and I caution the board about this, is that retirements are pretty easy to start planning for. Teachers who've been with us a long time and leave. But as you guys all know, there's a dire teacher shortage out there. And the problem becomes on August 1st when a teacher says to me, Neil, I'm leaving and I'm going to Fairfield County to make $15,000 a year more. Okay, they're going to leave. Now I've got to replace that teacher. And if it's a shortage area, like a world language, like a science, where the state actually designates shortage areas every year. Now, I might actually have to replace that teacher and overpay because I got to get a teacher in that classroom. I think they'll have a little bit of play in the budget to be able to do that. But again, it's not unusual to lose and again, by surprise, to lose a $60,000 a year chemistry teacher and have to replace them with a $70,000 one who's got a little bit more experience. Maybe they're looking to come closer to home. Maybe they're not happy where they are. So again, that's the competitiveness of the market out there. So, 10 years ago, I would be able to say to you, we're going to lose 15 teachers and we're going to save this much money because we're going to hire them all at step one. I just can't do that today. And that's the reality of the shortage that's out there. I do feel good, and again, I'm not going to talk a lot about this tonight. I feel good about where we are with our class sizes, with the jobs that we are not replacing. And one thing I am strongly recommending, I recommend it to the board. I actually have had conversations with the mayor regarding this and Rick Spryer. I think one of the things that has to happen is that as a city, we need to do similar to what Milford did, but I don't think we need to make the radical changes they're making. So I don't think we'll all be out of our positions by then anyway. So, but one of the things I think we need to do is look at a long-range study, look at some possible redistricting. The reality is, and I've got the data to show it and the reports to show it, is over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to lose 300 elementary school students, and that means you can close a school. Now, what school you want to close, you can do some redistricting. I know we talk about Carrigan. My suggestion was hold off on Carrigan because you may not want to close a school, but you may want to put the 5th grades back in the elementary schools and build a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade middle school. I think what you need to do, board needs to do, and the city, is to get some options so that you can plan for 4 or 5 years down the road, because we are going to not have to replace some staff members if that happens. And again, our class sizes are pretty good. Even the high school, I told the board last night, where which was up to close to 2,000, is down under 1,900. So I mean, at a school with that many kids and that many teachers, it doesn't sound like a lot because it's maybe not even one kid per class or whatever. But it is going down, and the trend is going down. It's not just going down in West Haven, it's going down all over the state of Connecticut. So again, I think that's something maybe for another day, but know that when we eliminate jobs, those are the kinds of things that we're looking at. We try to do it, we're doing it through attrition. No one's getting laid off. But I think it's more important to come up with a long-range plan as to how we're going to do it in a more thoughtful manner. And again, maybe it involves slight redistricting. All of our buildings now are in great shape. And if you could build a new school in back of Carrigan, and that would, we'd have, I think, state-of-the-art facilities, because our elementary schools are great. Bailey's in very good shape. High school's obviously very good. Your news, I know we spend a lot of time talking about Carrigan. But I think it would be worth waiting if you did it to do it right and to look at what you want that school to be. That's for another day. So that's where we currently are this year. I believe we've provided you with those numbers. I'm comfortable with these numbers. I thought the board received this information very well last night. I think we did. Kev, you can tell me if we're different. We were pretty specific about where we were showing them exactly how we could pare down. Those are real numbers. They're not like, if this happens, then we may be able to do this. These are actual numbers. Again, worry a little bit about the salaries and replacing some unexpected things over the course of the summer, but I think we've got enough play. We're a little bit over the number, and it's only the difference between a teacher leaving and what you bring the new one if you got to bring them in a higher step. So I think we're going to be okay. I think we're going to be in good shape. And with that, we're all available. I'll answer to the best of my ability any questions that I can.
Thank you. I do have several questions, but I'm going to have my colleagues get the ball rolling, except I do want to clarify one point on the seed grant on that document that you just gave us, because what I did notice when I compared it to the FY26 budget to actuals, that's the same amount, and that just struck me. So am I correct that the board's initial budget did not include the $700,000?
For the projected budget for 27, it did not.
Okay, so now you're adding it back in at the same amount.
We're putting it back in because we were concerned that we would have to create new programs, but we're going to be able to pay the current programs with that money.
Got it. Thank you. So before I get to my questions, I'll have my colleagues start. One thing I do want to say is that I understand that you have a bunch of folks from the administration, Chairwoman Waterfield's here. Whoever has the information necessary, just feel free to bring them up. I just can't have anybody from the audience.
You know what? Just go through me, and ask me, and I'll say, don't worry, I'm not afraid to use these guys.
Just have them come on up.
Yes.
Okay. Open up. Councilman Beaton?
Superintendent, thank you very much for your cooperation and collaboration with the mayor and the council. I applaud your efforts to go back and realize the savings for next year. It means a lot. My question is, can any of the projected savings on 27 be realized in the current budget?
We're close this budget. And I think one of the things that, one of the reasons we are got in the position we're a special ed, it is literally a crapshoot. And I can give you examples of if you're new, so I don't know if you've heard these stories before, but I don't know if your colleagues have. We'll get a notice. We got one 2 weeks ago, and Steph, again, correct me if I'm wrong. A young man or young lady was being released from a state prison. That student was being placed in a home far outside of West Haven. I don't even know if the student knows where West Haven is, but there's a foster family involved in West Haven. Guess who's paying the bill? So those are the kinds of things that can throw us off and do throw us off. I think right now, we're projecting about a $300,000, and Ann, again, has done a really nice job of projecting out and encumbering, what we think we're going to be, about a $300,000 savings, which, again, a special ed thing here or there could throw us way off. But, we feel pretty good about where we are right now. But, again, our job is to, if that happens, we would certainly let the city know, because those things, again, they're out of our control. In fact, and the mayor knows this one, and because I gave her some information. I was kind of waiting for an opportunity to, so you gave me a door opening. I brought a prop tonight, which I don't normally do. You know, one of the things, and we had actually had a conversation with our state delegation, and one of the concerns that keeps popping up with my colleagues in the superintendent's organization are the unfunded mandates. And this is, I didn't make copies of it, you don't need to see them all, but this is a list of the unfunded mandates based on laws that were passed by the legislature and signed into law by the governor of what we're dealing with. And those are the kinds of things, special education. In fact, I am going to let Steph talk about raising this is her big pet peeve. And again, we raised it with our delegation. The mandatory age to keep special ed kids with us was 21. It's now 22. Let them know what that added to our budget.
Certainly. Hi, I'm Stefania Larry. I'm the Director of Pupil Services. Happy to be here tonight. So what Neil was referring to in previous years, our students are our most disabled students who stay with us past graduation. Previously, they would be with us until age 21. And then they changed the legislation so that they would stay with us until age 22. And at first it was the day of their 22nd birthday, but then they changed it again so that they continue the remainder of the school year, which is great, right, for families that they're able to stay in the school system prior to transitioning to DDS and their transition program, the Department of Developmental Services. But that imposed a huge burden on taxpayers, right? Because we had to carry additional cohorts of students, especially those who attend therapeutic settings, for another year. And we added up the costs since that legislation passed of what that meant for us, and it was over $4 million. So just a simple decision like that, which is, again, great for students, great for families, can really bear a lot of weight when it's brought down at the district level.
And again, those are things that we have no control over. And, you know, I know Steph does a great job managing that department, but special ed is, you know, homeless kids, getting them to and from schools, and we've transported kids to New London, you know, daily basis at a cost of $350 per ride. So, again, and I remember the early days when I was a young administrator, DCF used to pick up a lot of those expenses. They don't anymore. Those have all been passed on to the municipalities. But I think that's a really good example of the extra burden that we've had to take on. And again, $300,000 in a $90 million budget, I don't want to tell you I can put it aside, but I can tell you this. When we've had money, we have turned it over to the city. We're not going to spend money we don't have to spend.
Are you all set? Councilwoman Tucker?
All right. Good evening, Neil. And thank you and the Board of Education for going back and reevaluating the budget and taking the time to comb through it. We really do appreciate that and all of the time, you know, that it took to do it. I have a question about nurses. You know, obviously, that's my passion.
I tried to prepare for this one, Kath. Go ahead.
I know you did the homework. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. But I know last year the last budget, we talked about increasing the budget for the numbers of nurses that you have. Can you just talk to me about where you are with nurses and,
Sure.
you know, what the state of affairs are with the
You know, it was
nurses?
funny. I was just talking to somebody right before the meeting, and I said, you know, for a while we had these nurses. They were here 25, 30 years. Those, you know, Sandy McCauley and, you know, Linda Miller and Gail Curran. They were just, and now they're leaving, and it's really hard to replace them. Yeah. However, I believe as of today, we hire, including our nursing supervisor, who I rarely see because she's out covering a building if there's an absence or whatever. We have 16 nurses.
You have
Now,
16?
16, including her, because she's often working. Now, let me break that down for you. One at each of these 6 elementary schools, so that's 6. 2 at Carrigan, 2 at Bailey, 2 at the high school, that's 12. We have a floater, that's 13. The supervisor is 14. And then St. Lawrence and Notre Dame, which, again, we are required by law to provide them with services. I will tell you, and we try to work the best we can with St. Lawrence, but that's a school, the enrollment's very low. They don't have the needs that some of our, we do pull the nurse if we need to make sure all of the buildings are covered.
Okay. So you have 16 nurses, but I recall us giving funding last time. We went up significantly with the numbers of nurses that we funded. Is there anybody that can kind of go back and
I don't know,
look
is
at
Jill here
that? or
tonight?
talk-
Jill Greco is our nursing supervisor
Okay. Yeah.
and does a really good job. I mean, tries to make sure all the buildings are covered every day.
Today was an important day for that.
Yes.
I'm sorry, can you just repeat
Yeah,
the
so I'm
question?
just concerned, I'm just questioning the funding that we had given to you guys for the budget for nurses. I think we increased the funding last time for the numbers of nurses. So I kind of want to see where you are now and whether you guys are on track with the spending for the nurses that we had given
I'm
last
going to
budget.
guess, Kathy, I'm going to guess that we're probably going to save a little money because throughout the year, there's been some vacancies, and then we try to fill them. So with the few openings that we
Neil,
have,
I'm sorry, could you get closer to the mic?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would honestly have to, I guess, do some more looking into the exact numbers, but what I can speak about is just sort of the staffing changes and things that have happened. So we've had several people leave, and not every one of those positions has been filled yet. So, for example, one of the Carrigan nurses, our Savin Rock nurse, and so although we are with the numbers that Mr. Cavallaro has given you, there's been a lot of transition so that we haven't been full the whole year.
Right, so that's what I guess I'm wondering, because I know you're saying that you have 16 total, but how many were
We have 16 now, including you.
actually in
If
the
you're including
positions?
me in that
or
number,
did you have
yes.
vacancies? And,
Today there are no vacancies? Oh, go ahead.
So today, the nurse from Carrigan resigned, I guess, about a month ago, so I have not yet filled that position. And also and also one of the West Haven High School nurses also resigned, so that position currently is being covered by our float.
okay, and are you using agency nurses, or are they all employed by the
We
city?
do not have any agency nurses at this time.
Okay,
And if I'm being honest, I prefer not to go that avenue unless it's really needed, because the hourly rate that they charge us is well beyond, even what we pay our full-time nurses, so it's not cost-effective typically for that.
okay, so the schools are pretty much uncovered then, if you don't have that? If you don't have that nurse there?
Yeah, I mean, to the best that we can, we do what we can every day.
Yeah, we do have a floater. Jill does cover for the most part. I would say the one school that gets left off is St. Lawrence, probably, just because of the number of students in the school, and, they don't have the special ed learning labs
Right.
with the needs that our public schools have.
Okay, so out of the 16 positions that you have that are funded, how many are vacant?
2 right now.
Okay, so you got 14 nurses.
We have 14 nurses, but we are funding them, and again, we do our best to try to fill them as quickly as we can. Kathy, I think we talked about this last year. The problem is, to be a school nurse, you have to be at a point in your life where your kids are either in school or out of school, and maybe you can make a little less money and you want your summers off, but they're difficult, they are difficult to find.
Yeah, no, no doubt, I understand. But I thought that there was funding that we had given in addition to the 16 nurses last year. So if there's anybody, I don't know if Ann can maybe speak to that. As, you know, just talk about the numbers of nurses that were funded, if you don't mind.
I can tell you that between 24 and 25, the 25 school year and the 26 school year, the budget remained flat. I don't have what was the number of people in for, that was used to budget those numbers, because I don't have access to that information, because I was not here. But the number did remain flat. There was
Okay.
no addition.
So even if we decided that we wanted to give money and earmark it for nurses, once it hit your budget, you could really do what you wanted.
We could,
Pretty
but
much
I would
with
tell
it.
you, we would, it's a recommendation we would take, and we would do our best to fill them. You know, again, we know what we can do, but we certainly don't want to, if you said, Neil, we'd put the money towards nurses, we would do our best. I'm not sure when the contract is up, maybe we don't get more nurses, maybe we make it a little more attractive to be a school nurse, and that will allow us to retain. I think those are conversations that we can have. I'll also tell you this, that one of my big things, and I know Jill, she's always interviewing, because we're always trying to have, you know, a bench, create a bench so that when somebody leaves, and they've been leaving, you know, we can bring somebody in right away. It's easier said than done, but we would work very close with you on that, and I think maybe the way to go is more, because I think 16 is adequate with the number of schools we have, but I maybe it's, you know, bumping up the pay a little bit. And
Well, yeah, so what numbers, how many schools specifically are you covering?
we have nine
For the
schools.
district, and then.
9 in our district, plus St. Lawrence, plus Notre Dame. And at the 3 big schools, there's 2 nurses.
Okay. Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Neil, before we get too deep into the FY27 budget, I have a couple of questions about the year-to-date figures and where we are in '26.
Okay.
I'm looking at the, as of March 2026, budget versus actual. I just have a few questions on it.
Sure. I'm going to let Ian handle that.
Yeah. Looking at page 1, where it's all the salary figures, there are certain positions here that I imagine that are administrative positions that are salary. I don't want to point any of them out specifically, but why are we tracking high on salary positions for administrators? Is there a,
You want to use, well,
It appears that there were contractual obligations that were not budgeted for previously.
like additional benefits, or?
you want to use my salary, for example?
I don't want to call anybody out,
No,
but
you
yeah,
can
let's
talk.
do
Listen,
that.
You know how many people have FOI'd my contract over the last 15?
I'm not one of them.
But I'll give you an example, and I will qualify it, and again, I'm not trying to defend myself, but when you look at superintendent salaries, based on the size and the needs of our district, mine's probably slightly below average, but I don't complain. I love it here. I wouldn't go work anywhere else. There are some perks in my contract. For example, I can cash out up to 3 weeks, and I think these are the things that weren't included that should be included going forward. I can cash out 3 weeks of sick time vacation time if I don't use them at the end of the year. So that would get added to whatever the salary listed here and why it's over. I can also, the board also contributes to a 403B. I'm not sure, that's an expense somewhere. I don't know where, but it does go into, it does go into my line item, I'm sure, somehow, some way. So I think that's probably, that's to answer the question. I believe that's the answer.
That's a perfectly reasonable answer. Starting on page 2 of that document, I counted 16 line items that appear to have a blank budget, and I imagine that they are incorporated into some larger line item. But I'm curious, how do we know if they're, where we're tracking on what internally you would be budgeting for if the budget's 0?
I did not create the budget. This is the budget I have to work with, so I'm going to start with there. I don't know how and what this was created with, but what I can tell you for the expenditures, I have been working with everybody to make sure that the expenditures are hitting the proper line, so when we go to file our EFS at the end of the year, which has to be done by, it needs to be loaded by school, it has to be by school, and so it must be much more granular than the way the budget is set up. Our budget seems to be set up at a much higher level, rolling up. So the budget was created at the high level, so you're looking at those city numbers. So underneath, like, say, an FO, I gotta put my glasses back on, FO2 postage. There's gonna be postage for each one of the schools, for central office, and they all roll up. In terms of printing and publishing, I would assume that it's probably all rolled into that postage line, so we'll have to do some budget amendments. So we'll be putting in some budget transfers to, it looks, and that seems to be what has happened in the past. If I look back, budget transfers were done between lines to meet the expenditures.
Okay, so internally, an expense account is being created to fit whatever the expense might be, if there's no higher level account that is appropriate.
Yes.
So, and I understand that predates you, but that also seems to be how the 27 budget is built, because if you look at the operation of plant budget, D 14, 18, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, and 32, there's no budget. It's not in the budget book. But you have significant expenses booked to it, which I agree with. I think that a more granular approach is the way to go, because that makes you be able to look and say, what am I going to spend money on? But when you go to then create the budget, how do you know that that top level includes all these numbers? Or can you stand there and say, I've looked at this, and that top level does include these expenses, and I'm okay with that?
As I've been going through the year, when we built the budget, I tried to keep it as in line with prior years, so that we're going year to year. There's no anomalies. We're not completely blowing up the budget and creating a whole new document. And we need to go from year to year to make it seem more seamless, especially since it's my first year. I'm going to tell you, I'm trying to keep things as similar as possible. I have gone back, as I'm going through the year, I'm looking at it and I'm seeing that there's a lot of budget transfers to create the lines not being over by the end of the year. And that seems to be the way that West Haven has done things. So I was keeping it similar. And and we're looking at things at the bottom line. Is the bottom line, are we okay at the bottom line? And that's how the past has seemed to work.
Okay.
Let me just, and I think Ann has done a lot to clean that up, and I think going forward, based on her work, it will be a much easier planning process. Keep in mind, though, the one thing that I would say is that when you say build a budget, really, we haven't asked for anything new. In other words, we said, what are our raises? What are the utilities costs? What are the benefit costs? And those are really the only expenses that we increased when we did this. So that was our starting point this year. And I believe going forward, she's getting a much better handle now that she's been through the process as to where the money goes. Mm-hmm. And I understand your concerns, and I think going forward, you're probably starting to see with some of the things that we gave you, you're starting to see a difference.
Well, and to your point, for me, if I was in your position, right, and I'm looking at just a bottom line number, the bottom line might look good, but it doesn't tell me the story of perhaps this line item is significantly underfunded, but that line item in the same family tree, so to speak, is way over, budgeted. So you might be able to reduce X to increase Y instead of saying I need more money or I have too much money. I'm a big proponent of the more granular process. I understand that people freak out over change, but I support that endeavor. Maybe over the next year or two, to do it in
Listen,
incremental
I
steps. But
think-
I think it's important to do that.
Chris, I've learned more about, because I'm not a line item, I'm not an Excel spreadsheet guy. Do we have the money, don't we have the money, here's where I think we can cut, whatever. But I've learned a lot about that, and, again, I'm seeing those processes being played, and now that I'm learning, I'm in more of agreement with you, and, again, to me, my thing is the budget balance, that's great. Or do we have a little bit of money at the end so we can do this? But again, I think those things are going to happen, and I think you guys are going to be pleased, and we're going to certainly, be as transparent as possible.
Great. One final question on the 26th, and then I'll open back up for the budget questions. I looked through your February year-to-date numbers, and I compared them to the March year-to-date numbers. And I plugged them all in because I noticed that the main categories, there was a lot of shifting. And I'm assuming that you're doing a lot of cleanup work or, whatever the vernacular you want to use. I'm assuming that that's your work. I would just like to understand, though, the total change was a reduction of $700,000 in a anticipated deficit for the year. And I'm just curious, can you walk me through what happened to generate that kind of a swing?
Let me give you a little background, and then I'm going to let in, if you need to be more specific. One of the things that happened this year, Chris, the federal government delayed a lot of the grants, and we didn't receive the grant money till late. And the way our grants or entitlements, because we get the money, the way they work is you've got to put the money out and then you get the money back. They came late this year. And by the way, and I'm going to turn it over to Ann, but I'm a little bit cautious about that, about what comes or the potential for some cuts down the road. Or the way, I don't know if there'll be cuts, but there may be different ways or methods in order to retrieve the money. But Ann, if you had anything to add to that.
So $737,000 is the seed grant, and that is with salaries. And we didn't know what we could use the money for, so we couldn't plan for that. So the money was all sitting in the general fund, like being expended. And then when the money finally came through and we knew what we could apply for it, all of our grants didn't come until the end of December. So we couldn't really shift our the expenditures to the grants until that time. And then with the seed grant, we didn't get the chance to apply for it until I think like January or February. And they finally released what we could use the money for. They finally had meetings about what qualified. So we were finally able to say, okay, we can utilize this for salaries, so we could move salaries from the general fund to the grants.
One
So
of the
I think-
things, excuse me, one of the other things that Ann and Raphael Frank, who's my science coordinator, but I gave her an extra assignment, what we really did was try to really max out the grants and spent a lot of time over probably that January to March time, making sure that we were utilizing the grants not only with salaries, but with benefits. And again, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I think all of our teachers and even our board members, when we mentioned it back at our budget meetings in January, what are the number of teachers that are current, of our 559 teachers, the number of teachers? 164 teachers, 192 total, clerks and staff. Yeah, so that's a lot to rely on grants, but again, we don't see that money going away.
So I think this is where my confusion lied, is this budget versus actual, this is only the general fund monies, right?
So the general fund goes through, there should be another page that shows all the grants.
That's mine.
It does. So let me give you
Okay.
just what's in my head. So I run a budget for, no secret, I run the budget for the church across the street, okay? So I have funding sources that are internal and external. My expenses, it doesn't matter if it's being funded through internal donations, external grants, whatever it is. My expenses are my expenses. And I just pay for it internally. I figure out how I'm going to pay for that. It seems to me that what this document is doing is it's saying that we're paying for, let's say, $1 million for this line item. But if I get a grant for $500,000, I'm reducing that by $500,000 on paper on this document because it's only 500 that's coming out of the general fund. Is that generally how your office is running
Yes.
this?
So if you take a look at the projected column, you'll see where items will go from the general fund to the grants. So I'll
The
be-
projection adjustments, the
Yes.
second to last column?
And that's why I do that, because one, our ADP software does not project the full salary. So it's only posting what's been expended and loaded into Munis. So we pay out of ADP, and then we have to take that information, load it into Munis, but it does not encumber our salaries. So that's why you see so many adjustments in the projection adjustment column, and that's me manually projecting out the remainder of the year for salaries. And then anything else that I know is coming down the pike, if we're in the middle of analyzing different accounts and we know we're going to be reducing purchase orders or we need to increase, so we've got something else coming, or if we're moving items, we've looked at and we've seen, okay, this item is really a grant item, but we had to pay for it at the beginning of the year, but we didn't get our grant till December. So we pay it out of the general fund and then we move the expenditures to the grant.
Is there ever a situation that you might have a line item that's $1 million, and you have a grant that could pay for that line item, among other line items, of $1.5 million, but that $1 million line item you actually spent 1.2? Is there ever a situation where that happens? Because if I look at that document and go through what you just did, we'll never see that line item was overspent by $200,000 because it's offset by the grant. It wasn't offset by the general fund, but you still overspent that line item by $200,000.
But we
Does that ever
didn't,
happen?
because the grants are very specific about what they're written for. All we're doing is we have to expend the money before we can get the money. So we then move the expenditures to where they should be properly aligned. If we're lucky and we've been trying very hard to put our purchase orders in to the grant directly so that those are going there. We have worked diligently to get all of our salaries put into the proper grants so that they're going directly to the grants and then we're not moving salary line items. But some of the information when I first started just flowed all through the general fund and have to be moved.
So my hypothetical really can't happen, is what you're saying.
We have to submit, again, their entitlements, you're going to get the money, but before they give you the money, you need to let them know, this is how we're going to spend the money, whether it's staff or whatever. And one thing that, again, these guys have done a terrific job of is, a $100,000 a year teacher leaves, and they're working at a building where the grant qualifies, we could put two $50,000 teachers on the grant and take them off the general fund. But again, those are, take our Alliance grant, it is heavily monitored. Like, they come down 3 or 4 times during the course of the year and not only, talk to Ann, but they go to visit the schools. They want to see the programs that we are saying that we're spending the money on and making sure that we're spending the money on it.
I guess just in broad strokes, what I'm trying to make sure is that at the end of the day, when you're creating a budget, you have internally, you could look and see that if I have $1 million budget for the line item and I spent 1.2, regardless of the fact if the overage came from a grant or it came from the general fund, at the end of the day you spent 1.2, so you're thinking, do I need the extra 200 for the next year? Or are you going to underfund that? The reverse might also be true, that you funded something for $1 million, but you only spent $800,000. So because that's not reflective here, because you're offsetting it with grant monies, and I understand why you're doing that, I still want to make sure that you have the ability to look at that granularly when you make your budget to know whether or not you are tracking over or under, regardless of the funding source, that the expense is over or under.
And that's something we are continuing to work on, and we have spreadsheets galore now of all of our analysis. We're tracking it by building. We're constantly monitoring our purchase orders in terms of what's the remainder on the encumbrance? Can we reduce it? Do we need to increase it? And we've been doing that regularly. And we've done that with our electric. We actually look at it every single month now. And we make any adjustments as each month comes through. And as we're getting closer to the end of the year, we're really, really watching those numbers. We've been adding every week. We keep adding analysis because it's not something that my staff has had to do before. So this is all new for them, and they're getting their arms around that.
Great, thank you.
By the way, we do plan on, Ann needs some help. I mean, she's a one-man show right now. I mean, we've assigned some people. We are planning on bringing at least one assistant in, and we'll pay for out of, the various grants. So they'll monitor those grants very closely. That's something that, again, once we get past this process, something we're going to work on quickly.
Sounds like you got a lot on your
Yeah,
shoulders.
no, she does. And again, listen, I mean
Hope you
this.
have a good back.
If you look at our central office, we have people, everybody's doing 2 and 3 jobs, and we just do them because we've always done it that way. But, I think our business office really needs some upgrades in that respect.
Councilman Quagliani?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, Neil, I want to thank you and the board again for the cooperation that you've shown with the mayor collaboratively to kind of work to where we are now. I think collaboration is definitely key. I won't stick to, I have a couple of questions about the current budget, but then I'll jump to the actual budget request. So I know firsthand that you didn't get here in 1 year as far as the challenges with the budget. So I recognize that that Ann is working very hard to sort things out. I think what I'm trying, it's hard to analyze the budget, right? I think that's an understatement. So I think I'd like to understand what your real-time entry is, if there is real-time entry, and after you fix all this year and all the numbers go in the proper accounts, is that an opportunity? I mean, we're on the same system, right? We're on the Munis system, so hypothetically, if I'm an employee and I wanted to go in and see what the police department's operations line item is, I should be able to go in and get a real-time snapshot. If I want to go to the Board of Ed and look at, library aids, I could get a real-time look and see at that moment in time what's in the budget. Is that something we're working towards, something that we're currently doing, or something that we can't do?
No, I think we're working towards it. For example, and I think we spoke about this a while back, Ron, posting payroll. That was an issue at one time, but whoever is doing it up at CITA is doing a really nice job in getting it. So that alone gives us a much more accurate account of what we actually have. So I think those things are happening. And as I said, I believe Ann is really fit in nicely with Dave Taylor and with Michael Gormany when he was here. And again, we're trying to make sure that we're all doing the same work and the same in getting it to you in the way that they want it. So I think those things are happening. And posting payroll was a big one.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that'll go a long way. And listen, payroll is light years ahead of where it was, just, from my experience. And again, if we, accounts payable, accounts receivable, if we could, again, get that, I think it would obviously make everybody's life a lot easier if we had.
I can
we're
tell you
able to
people
track
do
it.
get paid now on time. And we used to get a lot of calls, but I mean, those things have been cleaned up, and I think that goes a long way. By the way, it goes a long way with us being able to do business with various vendors.
Right.
It helps more people want to work with us, and gives us more options.
Understood.
And we have been I have had everybody putting up, especially with special ed, transportation, we're not putting up only as the bills come in. We're not putting in requisitions and purchase orders. We're projecting out for the year, and then we're constantly adjusting those encumbrances as we go along, because otherwise you're never going to know where you're going to land. So you have to put those encumbrances in.
Yeah, there shouldn't be very many vouchers anymore. It should be all purchase orders mostly drawn off and then bills drawn off of those purchase orders, correct?
We do no vouchers in the
Good.
Board of Ed.
Good. So I kind of see where you're looking at the $300,000 maybe at year end. Are there any revenue inflows that that are, yeah, you project that aren't part of this? So, like, I know you do some interdepartmental transfers, but that's probably an outflow from you to, like, the police department, right? Are there any, has all of your grant money come in and all of your revenue inflows?
I will tell you, that's, not that it's a problem, but sometimes what I think needs to happen is there needs to be better communication, because the police department will send the bill and they'll pay the bill or they'll take the money of our funds and we just didn't know it. But so I think those are little things that we can clean up, you know. But like you're right, the resource officers is a good example.
I mean, the only really revenue that we receive that is not projected, and it's minor, is when there is an outside event, like a rental of the high school, or like a dance recital or something. They charge for security, and then the department, they receive that into the student activity fund, the check, and then they actually a lot of times have them write a check separately to the Board of Ed to cover the security guards that get billed to us. So they just send it off to us. So we get very minimal, but we do put those deposits in.
Yeah,
We get
unfortunately.
things like Medicaid.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
But unfortunately, like those rentals and it's not gonna
Yeah.
solve, you know.
Not gonna tip it, I get you, I get you.
We put it against the security line, or if there's any custodial overtime, we put it against that.
All right. So I'll jump to 27. So when you talked about unfunded mandates, so I'm trying to understand, it's a little bit frustrating to me, and I think I had an offline conversation with you about provider caps, which I don't think there is such a thing, right? They could just kind of charge what they want to charge
For
without.
private facilities, correct, yes,
Right,
you are right.
So how about, I mean, listen, I understand special ed, and if you know, we obviously we do our best to keep them in district. If we can't, then we have to outsource that. But I don't understand, so the student that says, listen, you guys have a nice high school here, but I want to go to Lyman Hall. So is there a requirement for,
You can't deny those kids.
and it's their personal choice not to go to school in West Haven, but yet the West Haven taxpayer has to pay for them to be able to go to school outside of district.
We,
Because they're a West Haven resident.
Right, right.
we provide the transportation. By law, we have to. But, look, we're not gonna pay for anything we don't have to pay. Unfortunately, and again, there are opportunities for kids. We're in the education business. However, again, Stefania will tell you, those are all coming out of the pupil service budget, and they're really not what you guys would consider, what we would all consider to be special ed, but it's an expense we have to incur.
And transportation is the same way. Do we have in-district transportation, out-of-district transportation, private
Yes,
transportation?
we have our own in-district contract with Winkle. Winkle, as part of the contract, as part of the law, we transport high school students who attend magnet schools in New Haven, and the below high school, you'll see First Student buses. They have the contract in New Haven and West Haven. They transport the kids to the magnet schools in New Haven. But we obviously pick up the expense with Winkle for those kids.
And is there a formula that we use per student that's out of district? Is there?
Here's what I can tell you, Ron, and the mayor knows this because I think it's one of the first things I taught her when I said, watch out for that ECS formula if they change it. We want more money. But one of the things is when a student, a West Haven resident attends a New Haven magnet school, they receive, as part of the, you've probably heard the number, or whatever, the $11,000, they receive the money, we receive the money. So it kind of helps us. The kids aren't going to school in West Haven, and we're getting the money for them, that child. And that could change, and I believe, and again, maybe the mayor could, but several years ago, New Haven was considering charging, and I believe what the legislature did was they passed a law that says, okay, you can do it, but you've got to give a year's notice, and they've never done that, but it is a possibility. And, but I don't believe the way the law is written or when it was changed that we can deny that the student access. Because remember, those magnet programs were designed for equity and racial balance and, for kids to have opportunities.
No, agreed. And listen, I appreciate you're talking about a three or 5 year plan. So I think it'd be not only do you need a master plan regarding schools and enrollment and potential redistricting, but probably if there's a way to get to a multi-year financial plan, right, as opposed to just one year at a time, that kind of could match up to that master plan. So I agree with that. I think that's that's going to be necessary sooner rather than later.
I think it all ties together because I think that's going to directly impact your staffing and your needs. Your busing, you maybe less bus routes, for example, going forward. Yeah, but I think that's all a part of it, and I think Anna's really done a good job of projecting and looking at where, giving us a better idea of where we stand year to year. But I agree with you.
And if the council decides to fund the Board of Ed budget as recently recommended, right, there's that maybe $2.2 million or whatever the swing is. So the state is now very cooperative with us, and they give us $3 million. So
I think it's 5.4, but that's if the 170 passes. That was the latest number I saw.
all right. So I think my point is that what you're intended to, what arrangement that you and the mayor made regarding that monies, if there's more that comes from the state, it doesn't.
The city keeps that anyway and they give us. They're not obligated to give us that increase.
Mm-hmm.
I think, in fact, I saw the head of the superintendent's organization, and she said, with this governor's blue ribbon commission, as they start talking about permitted increases and a formula, obviously one of the things they're fighting for is that they want the money to come directly to the districts.
Mm-hmm.
But that money goes to the city, and then the city could give us all or part of it. And again, I think we agreed on a fair number.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Questions? Councilwoman Akbarelli?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Neil, for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. I just had a question about the travel dues and conferences. I see each year the ask was $77,000, and the actual is significantly lower each year. Do you foresee using the $77,000 this year for that travel?
No, we actually talked about that. Did we move some of that money, or we're not planning on using that money? The travel and conferences. The answer is no, and we will be moving it. Where we're moving
Okay.
it, I can't tell you.
Okay. I just wanted to.
No, I'm sorry, I don't have a
No,
better
that's
answer
okay.
for you.
I appreciate it. All set for now. Thank you.
Councilwoman Tucker?
So Neil, I just have a question about transferring funds. So you mentioned a little while ago in your discussion that you have, like you gave the example about, the $1 million and you're moving funds from one place to another. I know in council, when we're moving funds, we discuss that at a council meeting, and we do the process of transferring funds and approving. Do you guys follow that process at all?
We do the transfers. In fact, we did a bunch of them. However, the education laws are a little bit different. In other words, if we need the money, we can do internal transfers, and then we can bring it to the board afterwards. Again, based on a specific need that may come up. I'm thinking in terms of special ed, but there is a little bit more flexibility and that allows us to do it, and then again bring it back to the board afterwards.
So when you do it that way, you're bringing it to the board just as a matter of information, but not necessarily.
I don't think it happens that often, but I'm telling you, I think it's written because there's state laws that they anticipate unexpected things come up, and you've got to make an educational decision. I'll give you a good one that we were recently talking about. A special education student needs transportation to wherever out of the district at a special placement, and all of a sudden the company says, we're no longer, we can't, the child has too many needs. We can't safely transport the child. So we got to go out and find somebody else, and maybe it's a little bit more expensive. So we can't keep the student out of school. That would be denying this.
Right, I understand the whys and wherefores, I get all that.
Uh,
And I mean, because it happens, and there's so many examples that you could use. and
Yeah,
I
we,
get
we
the
try not to,
examples.
Kathy. I can tell you, we do our best.
But I guess what I'm asking is about the process of documentation, kind of where Chris was going with that.
I think
So,
at one point,
to be able
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I apologize. Go ahead.
to be able to keep track of where the money is moving, between accounts, when, where, why, and whatever. So if somebody wanted to go back and do an accounting of where the funds were spent, where they were moved, whether or not they were replaced adequately enough, or whatever have you, the transparency, I guess, is what I'm asking about, more than the reasons why. So, with that example, how then do you keep track, and how does your Board of Education keep
Here-
track of when those types of things are happening if it's not?
It's a very fair question.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm going to tell you. And I thought a lot about this. One of the good things about MARB, I think MARB kept us honest when Matt Cavallaro was here. He would basically have to bring those transfers to MARB, get them approved, and then the next meeting would take them. Well, Matt kind of left right around the time when we left MARB, and we had two finance directors since, and now Ann has really reinstituted that process. But I will tell you that it was lax, but it was not lax because we wanted it to be lax. It was lax because we had two finance directors, but we just bought a bunch before the board. Between now and the end of this fiscal year, we will be doing probably more transfers than we'd like to because, again, of the way Ann is trying to reorganize the budget and get all the line items in place. And the only other thing I would say to that is that, I know what boards of, the reputation or the thought is that boards of education could just move money around and do things and they don't have to go to the city. It really doesn't happen a lot that way. Most of our money, just like the money on the city side, goes to the salaries and the benefits and the fixed cost. Really, our discretionary funds are the instructional materials, are the things we need to do for kids. So those are kind of the glaring transfers that have to happen. But again, I think we had a process in place. We had two transitions in finance directors. We are, I believe, doing a much better job now based on our last couple of financial reports, the transfers that we've done, and that we will continue to do going forward.
Yeah, my hope is that, just the internal controls that you have are managed regardless of transitions in positions. And that's why, I'm asking that just because of, all the reasons why we're here, the transparency of it all, and just the perceptions. We were under the MARB at one point, and, I don't want to, end up in the news or in
That's
the
not
MARB
what
or
I
anything
wasn't.
else. So that's the reason why I'm.
No, I think those are
kinda
they're
asking.
very fair questions. And again, I think we've done we're doing the right things. And again, we're trying to do it like the city is saying this is the way it should be done. Again, we're part of the audit, so that's we do get the suggestions, and we've again, I think in the last year or two, we've tried to do better to clean that up as well. But again, we don't want to give. And by the way, I think again, this is not unique to West Haven. There's always that geez, what's the Board of Ed doing, and why isn't
Yeah,
the city
I'm
able?
not asking the question.
No, and I know
Look,
you're
I'm
not, but I know
coming
there.
from that.
But I know that's out there, Kathy, not by you.
Yeah, but that's not why I'm asking. I'm asking
you've been
about
around and you understand the
transparency
process.
and
I get it.
about, just making sure that we maintain the internal controls that should be there so that there is documentation when money is moving. That's simply why I'm asking.
I
There's
understand,
nothing
and I
else.
agree with you, and we will do our best.
Thank you.
Councilman Donovan?
Thank you, Chairman. We meet again. First off, again, just like everybody else said, I'm glad, thank you for you, the board, the mayor, coming back, relooking at the budget and knocking it down 2.1. Makes our job easier as well. I'm also glad you mentioned something about the state mandated. items that they're requiring us to do that now the municipalities are paying for. Before I get into any kind of budget questions, I think everybody in this room, anybody that's listening, should be contacting your state rep, contacting your senators, letting them know that these mandated items that the state is having us do and pay for is costing, there's 169 cities and towns. I only care about one, obviously, but it's costing us all money. And it hurts, sometimes it'll end up hurting the kids, but it hurts the taxpayers as well. So I think the state, by them doing that, obviously is now turning around, and it's really hurting the entire state, every town and city.
Gary, they have the biggest lobbying groups, and like homeschool, for example, or some of these. When it's amazing to see them show up and put the pressure on. So I think we've got to do our groups, my superintendent's group, CCM. You just got to stay on top of that stuff.
100%. The transportation part, just briefly, and I know Winkle's been pretty good with us. Have we talked about getting other bids, or is it not even worth it because he's giving us such a good deal?
It went out to bid the last time. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. The last time, it was the spring of 2023. It was around March. We thought that would give ample time. We did put it out to bid because we had gone to MARB the time before, and they said, we really want to see this go out to bid. We put it out to bid. They were the only bidder. Now, we had actually solicited a couple of other companies, and I can tell you, one of the things the larger companies said, Neil, you get what you pay for. You're not getting, and I can talk to you about, badges and things that chart kids and do whatever. They said, we certainly know of West Haven's relationship with Winkle. We can't compete with the prices, but you should rip off the Band-Aid because there are a lot of services. Unfortunately, or fortunately, Gary, he's a pretty good guy to work with. He's our guy, and we probably do a lot more than we should, but he gives us a really good price.
Yeah, no, I know him very well. He used to be a neighbor, so-
But here's what I can also tell you. Let me finish. So we took this, in fact, I was looking today. We took this before the MARB, I want to say in August of 2023, to say, look, they were the only bidder. We believe we got a good price. We showed them comparables. I believe we even brought our lawyer to the meeting because he's involved with a lot of negotiations and writing a lot of contracts. They wouldn't approve it. They said, you got to give us more information. And in fact, I remember this, and I looked at the minutes today, and Tom Hamilton, when we came back, he said, look, the next time we're going to recommend you put the contract out a year in advance. Makes sense, give more people time to bid. He said, but you really did your due diligence, and based on what we're seeing, we don't see a company that's going to charge you less than Winkle. So they unanimously approved the contract, but they were tough on that one. But I think we lived and learned because we had always asked for extensions, and I have to be honest with you, a lot of times we didn't go out to bid because Craig would offer us, I'll take 2 zeros because of the financial state of the city, but can you extend the contract? So we kind of did that forever, and probably not a good practice, but again, at the end of we're not getting ripped off, is what I'll tell you.
I mean, he does care about the city as well. I mean, he is a businessman, but he does,
Yeah.
really does care about the city. But getting back to the budget stuff, and I was looking through it, a lot of the stuff, especially 2023, 24, 24, 25, things that are in there, and I looked at it, it's contractual, and I get that. But no money was spent under that specific item. So where does that money go back to the general fund for BOE?
Well, we do make transfers.
Okay.
Here's what I can tell you, Gary, and that's a really good question. And years and years ago, there was a council resolution or ordinance that was passed that said we can turn back up to $250,000 and it would be kept in case we needed it. I even think since then there's been some state laws which says you can put a certain 2% and carry it over. Again, we've always worked with the city, and when we've turned money back, we've never said, we need that money, because we know you guys need the money, and, it's just what we've always done, and we would continue to do it. And again, we take the position that if we don't have to spend the money, we're not going to spend the money.
No, that I get, and I was around when BOE did hand back some of the money to the city, which is great. But I guess my thing is, when it comes to the contracts, what if you just don't put it in that contract? You haven't used it in X amount of years. So
Contract?
contractual, some of the things that are contractual, right? And I'll use something small. Community service custodials, right? Past 3 years, it's only 16,000, but you haven't used the time.
Custodians, you said?
That's what it says, custodials, yeah. I'm just going by what's here.
Mhm.
Community service custodial in the contract is contractual, saying that, 16,000 in each year, you're asking for it, but you haven't used that money. So I'm saying, when it comes to something like those items, we just cut it out of the contract. I know it's not
Yeah.
something people like to hear.
Here's, again, I can't speak to what that 16,000 is for, but I can tell you what we do with custodians. Number one, we've pared down the number of custodians in our district greatly. We have we don't use substitute custodians anymore. We have a part-time service. And what we did was, several years ago, we worked out an agreement with our union that says, when an AFSCME employee retires, we'd like to be able to hire as part of a service, 2 non-union people, cleaners, especially during COVID. They were there, remember, doing the windows and the door handles, and the high touch point areas, what they call it. Those guys save us a lot of money, and we're not paying benefits, we're just paying the cost of the service. Now, I don't know if that also, again, maybe Ann has it in her book. She's got everything in her book, but I don't know. But I also know that, when we rent a facility out, you've got to pay, part of it is, I'll waive any fee, but I can't waive the custodial fee, because that's what,
Right.
Again, especially depending on the sport or, whatever, if it's a community event or something,
Mike will come in and take care of the custodial part of that.
Yeah, no, you know that. Mike does, actually, Mike does a great job with the facilities, and Joe does a great job at the rink. And again, just to point out, we used to have full-time people involved with all of that, They do that as part of their phys ed athletic director responsibility. So they really, give us a good bang for our buck, and they watch the money very closely. And Mike's not afraid to collect it, which I like.
The last one I want to discuss, the lunch aids that we had. I believe it was last year, a couple of years ago, we were using teachers.
Yeah, here's what I can tell you about that. So when we got the COVID money,
Right.
When schools closed, it was hard to get lunch aids back. We wanted certified teachers out on the playground to make sure that we can separate kids and watch the kids in the lunchroom. And we were doing that, and we were utilizing COVID money for it. Then the COVID money ran out. The expenses were pretty high. What we've done, in fact, we have a 1-year agreement with our teachers union, because we've limited the number of teachers that we would hire. My position is that one good teacher makes up for 2 or 3 non-certified lunch aides. Now, it's difficult when the kids are doing indoor recess. I think it's doable. They would argue differently, but we'll have that discussion when school ends. We're gonna analyze it. It's our principals love using the teachers. Why? Because there's a certified person out there who knows the kids, who have the respect of the kids. They can discipline the kids. There's not kids running in and out of the office. So they would advocate that we have more teachers on lunch duty. The way our contract works right now is that our elementary schools, they are not required to do lunch duty. Whereas in the middle school or the high school, it could be part of an assigned duty during the course of the day. So we would put that on the table. It'd probably be, when we negotiate with the teachers, it's going to be the first thing that they say, no, we don't have to do it, we're not going to do it. maybe we can work something out as far as the pay. But we've lowered the number, and I think, we're going to analyze it this year to see if we saved any money. But it's such a much safer environment to have the certified teachers out there. We could save money, but in the end, if a kid gets hurt,
Yeah, no, I get it. Again, I think everybody's doing the best they can with what they have. Do appreciate you coming back and making the cuts that you made. And we'll see how everything else goes, but thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Neil, I've got a bunch of questions on the 27 budget. Do you have the budget book, or have you committed to memory by now?
My budget book or your? Yes, I do. Yep.
Okay. I want to start off, it's not really in the actual figures, but it's part of your presentation, and there's no page numbers, but it's the page that says what we've done to manage rising special education costs. So I recognize that this is the great unknown, right? And it's not exact science of when you might get a student that has a specific need that's not budgeted. Can you walk me through the process of how do you come up with your figure, and does that figure have some padding in it in case you get a student placed in November or February?
The page which says tuition continued, is that the one you're looking at?
No, up top it says what we've done to manage rising special education costs, and it has a bunch of bullet points on it.
I can have Steph talk to that, but one of the things I'll point out is that particular page which I just mentioned, those are actual costs.
Which one was that?
It says, it's under the special ed section, it says tuition continued, talks about outplaced students. Those are actual students and the actual cost of those students.
Per student.
Per student, and the transportation. And again, Steph can, if you need more details, but if you look at why the transportation is so different, it's one student may require an individual bus with a harness, with two paraprofessionals, and they're going whatever school they're assigned to. So that's the variance.
Yeah,
But
I'm not just
No,
to
no,
clear
no,
it up.
no,
I'm not
I know that's
questioning
not
the
the question
number.
you're asking. Go ahead.
What I'm trying to figure out is the rationale that you use to create the budgetary number, because I understand and I appreciate that this isn't something that you could very easily project. It's not like I could say that cost of electricity is going to go up X percent or whatnot. You might get a student placed in November in the middle of the school year. You might get somebody or two placed in February, and it throws everything out of whack. So what I'm curious is, what's the thought process to come up with the budgetary number, and is there a cushion baked into that number that I could have maybe $150,000 or $300,000 in unknowns, but once it reaches past that, then I've got a problem?
Yep, certainly. So for each of our students, we are billed monthly, and we track all of their invoices and report them for excess cost. So student by student, for tuition, services, and transportation, I have to, 3 times a year, provide the invoices and evidence to support that I'm requesting this money for excess cost. So all of the students are tracked in that manner. To build the budget, we added a percentage increase in the event of tuition increases, and we did a lot for an additional student in that tuition line item as well. So that's how we came up with the AO1 tuition for next year.
Would you like to hear about excess costs too? Because I know that that's the second ECS formula, but there's the education cost sharing, and then there's.
Sure. If I could just ask one follow-up question to something
Sure.
you just said.
Yep.
You build in basically a budget for one additional student per year. Do you know how you're tracking? Over the last, let's say, 5 years, do you average 1 student per year, 2 students per year?
So we have, we know who's graduating based on their age. So that gives us some stability where we know that we could project. It's not that Our staff within our schools, they're doing a phenomenal job with maintaining students in their home schools. This year, we had 2 students that the district initiated the therapeutic outplacement. It's more so of our move-in students. Now, 2 or 3 weeks ago, within one day, I had 2 students move out and 1 student move in. And that was within one day. So I, in collaboration with the finance department, we're looking at each of the schools' encumbrances, and we're adjusting them weekly, monthly, on an ongoing basis because of that weekly, change. So with the students moving out, with our graduations, and knowing also that we wanted an increase in AL1, but we also know we have to be reasonable. We did a lot for 1 additional.
So I don't want to speak for anybody else up here, but for me, what concerns me about this is it seems to me that special education is the great unknown. And what I'm looking for is how do you make that unknown a little bit more stable?
Yeah.
Where this budget amount, you're confident it may go up, but it's not going to be millions of dollars over.
Well, I think,
budget.
so I want to point out also that last year was significantly different than this year. So what's different from last year to this year, we increased AO1 by $1 million. We got based on the money that we received from the operating budget. We received the seed grant of the 737 and 2.3 million in excess costs. So that's 4 million alone, that made this year significantly different than last year. So I know that based on last year's numbers, you're concerned about this year for sure.
Exactly, right.
I do also think that this year's cohort is very different than last year's. We had students that were staffed 2-to-1 that graduated this past June. So I think the cohort's very different this year. But you are right. A student can move in tomorrow who's placed at the American School for the Deaf in West Hartford. And that we would be responsible for. And we have many multifamily homes here in West Haven and a lot of families who rent. So we do have ongoing registration. So that part I can't predict, but we are building classrooms in district to support our students and continuing to look for different ways to support our students in district, but it's the move-in students
And
that
that's
I
actually
can't predict.
where my next question was going to be, is what we don't have is a capital budget for the Board of Ed yet. Is there an opportunity to create opportunities for those students to remain in district instead of having to transport them out of district? And if the answer to that question is yes, is there any thought of what the investment strategy would look like, what the cost of that would look like, and where, in terms of timing, where the break-even point would be?
For our move-in students or students that are currently with us?
Well, I guess either way. So anybody that we have to transport out of district.
Let me, again, and I'm going to do the best I can to answer that question, because those are things that we do think about. First of all, we have collaborative classrooms within our district that ACES actually runs for us. And Steph has done a really good job of creating more of those programs. That keeps our kids in our schools. There's a cost, but it's not the cost of, if they were placed out. Second, what you've got to remember about many of these kids is that if a family moves in and a child is already placed in wherever they're placed, they're going to remain there. The only thing that changes is we're going to get the bill. So it's very difficult, even when you create a program, to convince a family to bring that child back. It's all part of the planning and placement team process, and there's got to be an agreed upon. Now, the other thing we have to be careful about is when you create special ed programs, what you don't want to do by law is you don't want to isolate those kids. You know, you would need a targeted group like Steph has talked about. If we were able to do something, and we've talked with the mayor about Noble Center, you know, maybe it would be the adult classes that would come in. ACES would help us run those, and they would pay either we would get credits to our tuition, or they'd pay us a fee. But again, what's got to happen is ACES it's going to start with an overflow, and you're correct. There would be several years before we would see a break even or a profit. But I know, for example, they do something similar right now in the town of Ansonia. In Ansonia, it took them a while, but they're getting good money from tuition. But it would be easier to do it that way because the programs through ACES are already established. So it's just a matter of where that program is taking place. For us to run them, again, you're talking about really high need kids. You're talking about behavior techs. You're talking about, you know, nurses, therapists, teachers, speech people. So again, it's easier said than done. I think I like working with ACES. I like the idea of working with ACES. I would like the idea of more regionalized programs where districts can share the burden. We do some things now with through ACES with transportation, where if there's kids from Milford and or West Haven that are in the same placement, they're going on the same bus. That saves us a little bit of money. But you know, it is a challenge, and it is the unknowns. I will say this too: like if you look at our trends. Slightly down in the number of kids we are placing out, as Steph mentioned. You know, they're the move-in kids that are, for the most part, they're already out, or you know, they've already been placed, even if they're coming to West Haven. And again, they don't know where West Haven is, but the kids are never stepping foot in West Haven. Very difficult, but I think they do a really good job of monitoring it. And I think, you know, again, it's going to take some time, but we are exploring options. But, you know, again, I would say the laws aren't on our side. The laws are there to protect the kids, and okay, they do a good job, but it's an expense.
I'd like to jump to the transportation section. So if I look at the history, 23 and 24, we budgeted, I'm just going to use round numbers, 5.9, the actual 7.8. 24 and 25 budgeted 6.1, the actual was 8.8. So we're trending about $2 million over budget the last 2 years. And then this year, for 27, it's 7.6, which is still less than what the actuals were for the last 2 school years. Can you reconcile that for me?
And do you have any?
So we put a 9% increase on the Winkle, because that's contractual. And then you have your special education transportation. I know last year we used a vendor quite a bit because we couldn't get anyone else to transport certain high needs individuals, and we're not utilizing them that much this year. We're only utilizing them for one student, so we were able to knock that down. Last year was an anomaly.
Okay. And I promised my wife I would ask this question. There's enough to cover bus transportation for the band who wants to compete this year, right?
Here's the way I look at that. I feel bad that they feel bad asking me, but I would look at that no different than the football team needing to go to play Guilford High School. You know, it's something we have to do. I want our kids to be part of those competitions. I want our kids to be seen and recognized for the talents that they have. We would always find the money, we always have the money. That's what we're here for, to provide those opportunities for kids. That I can assure you.
Great.
For as long as I'm here, that will happen. Oh yeah, Chris, maybe you're involved. I know you're involved with the band parents. On Friday morning, Kebby just reminded me, we're having a celebration for the band parents at 8:30 at the high school, which you and any council member welcome to attend because of the St. Patrick's Day Award. Which again, they keep the money, and that money goes right to the program. We're happy they participate. When I get the feedback on things like that, I couldn't be more proud
I was
of
at
what
the
our
parade,
kids
and
do.
they did an absolutely fantastic job.
Yep.
Usually gets a live video from the grandstand.
On the salaries, when are the contract negotiations? Are we in the middle of them, or are they coming up soon?
No, we will start, I know when they are. We will start teacher negotiations this summer for the following year. You will receive.
So that won't hit until the FY '28
When
budget?
when you negotiate teachers, contracts, certified contracts, and administrators, you negotiate them a year in advance, and because we have binding arbitration, they can't strike and whatnot. There are certain dates that you have to have a settled contract. You will receive a letter from me, probably sometime late June, that says we are starting negotiations. You are welcome to have a representative as part of our bargaining team.
And teachers includes, does that include paraprofessionals too?
No, it doesn't. They're part of AFT, but they're their own separate bargaining unit.
And when does that start around the same time?
I believe they have they're up next year.
Next year, okay.
And they're not they don't negotiate a year in advance. That's the teachers and administrators. Those are certified positions only.
Under operation of plant, specifically for the rink, can you walk me through how, or is that not party?
The rink was set up to be a standalone account. It is the one account where we can take in revenue, we can carry over revenue, and we actually do pretty well there. We don't run a deficit. We make about $40,000 a year. I believe Chris's salary as the facilities manager does come out of that account because at one time he was stationed out of the rink, so that's a good thing for our budget. However, and again, I think this was the rink was so popular at one time, it never really made all this tons of money. It can't because at the end of the day, the Board of Ed is subsidizing it, or if something breaks, the city's going to it. There does need to be some capital work that needs to be done. We certainly have to go to the city. We don't make enough money to cover that. One of the things that we actually are trying right now, the city actually did bond for some money or set aside some money and bond it. We are trying to make the pitch, and I mentioned this to the mayor, that one of the reasons, the way the rink was set up, and it really is interesting, they set it up and they were pretty smart in doing so. They set it up as a classroom as part of West Haven High School. And as a result of that, they were able to get 50% reimbursement on the rink. So that's why West Haven Board of Ed operates the rink. So we're trying to say, look, we think it's no different than a gymnasium if we're doing capital work. I think we have a couple of $1 million set aside, but if we can get the state to say, yeah, you're right, its main function is a classroom, we would get reimbursed, we'd be able to do about $4 million worth of work. And it needs it. It's a beautiful rink, but it needs some freshening up.
Some TLC.
Yep.
On the purchase services contract, and this was one of the line items that I mentioned in the year-to-dates, F30, which is the subscriptions. Budgeting $3,500, but you're booking $258,000 to it.
That is actually the ELA benchmark program and the grant money. did
ELA
not
is
come out.
English. This is Rafaela Frank. She's been working a lot on our grants and money. But
Yeah.
Benchmark is our language arts reading program, which was mandatory. Another mandatory by the state. You've got to purchase a program.
So the grant money did not come in until, it was under the Alliance grant, but the grant money didn't come in until the end of December, so it was paid out of that account, and there was gonna be a budget transfer coming out of the Alliance into that.
Gotcha. And that's included in the FY '27 budget? You've accounted for that expense?
Yes, for next year. It's yearly contract, last year the contract is next year for benchmark.
Okay.
It's a 3-year contract.
And then on that same page, line F34, the Frank Fitzgerald Sports Complex, you're budgeting $60,000 to provide funding for an anticipated shortfall between revenue and expenses. Can you elaborate where that delta comes from?
Yeah, there's a cost to operate that facility. Yeah, we have, for example, we have part-time workers that clean up again, another thing which saved us money because we don't have a full-time manager at the stadium that only works 6 months a year and a full-time manager at the rink with a full staff there that works the other 6 months of the year. What we have are Mike and Joe doing a lot of the scheduling. We have Chris who oversees the maintenance. We have an employee of ours who kind of oversees both day-to-day, the actual cleaning, but the rest are part-time workers that work for the substitute service, which I refer to. And then there's the cost of, whatever materials and things we need to buy. But at the end of the day, and I know this question comes up every year, there aren't enough rentals in order to make money or offset and run that as a profit. Whereas the rink, it's a little bit different where you're charging people for the ice time every time they use it. And even then, it's limited because we're using it for skating class most of the day, and we have 2 hockey teams.
Right. And on your last budget, the instructional supports, line G29, it's a technology line item. You have a budget of $120,000, but you're projecting $281,600 as of March.
Is that the Van Cord?
Right, but I have an adjustment column, and that's because there was a grant that I am moving that 45,000 from there because it was already expended, and it's got to we have to put the paperwork through.
So okay, so the listed overage on as of March 31st is going to be offset by
Right, you'll see
grant monies.
the adjusted column says $13,000 to the good.
Okay. And then on the budget versus actual, I noticed that there's 2 specific line items, G30, it's called psych, and G34, med miscellaneous, that adds up to about $95,000. That's not in any of these the top line items, so I'm just curious where those fall and what they're for.
It's the bridges.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Both of them? Both line items are for bridges?
It looks like it needs, it probably was booked to the wrong line.
Okay.
Because one has no budget and the other has 10,000.
Okay. Do you have any capital, the 5-year capital plan additions that you expect to be coming?
We actually we worked with Rick and we reduced it as much as we could. There was some money that was already expended and some projects that were started, and some that we said, look, I think the rink was one, for example. Look, we've already started design and things, but we did the best we could to reduce it and try to help the city out.
And
So
we did submit our 5-year.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
We'll get that when we get the majors
Here's what I
budget,
could
but I
al-
just don't have it now.
Yeah, and here's what I could tell you too. We've revised it and we really have done our best to try to cut back. So what you have may not be what the final version is, but we've worked pretty closely, I think, with the finance and the administration on that.
Yeah, so because of the timing of the budget process this year, we don't have the mayor's recommended budget. We won't have that for another few weeks. So we don't have the capital plan yet. That's why I'm just asking. So you may get some emails from us if we have questions about that, since we don't have it in front of us tonight. 'Cause
Chris, that's absolutely
I don't want you all coming in again.
That's absolutely fine.
Last thing I just want to say is I want to thank you, Neil, and your entire staff and team, Chairwoman Waterfield, and everybody on the Board of Ed, Mayor, all working together, and her staff, everybody working together to bring down the budget to something that everybody could at least live with. We may not all be happy with it, but it's something that we hopefully can all live with. As a father of a teenager at West Haven High School, I want to give you all the money in the world. I want you to have the best of the best. But as a council person, I have to balance what you all are saying that you need versus what every other department says they need versus what I think that the taxpayer, including myself, can shoulder. So it's not the best position to be in. So cooperation is number one, and I appreciate everybody in this room working towards that goal together.
Yeah, again, I hope again, those of you that have been around and know me, I hope you'll see that that's been our track record to do the best we can. Again, good compromise, where they say nobody's really happy, so I guess we did okay. On another note, just again, I won't talk too much about it, but I just received, for those of you that are familiar, and I'm not going to go into details, but Rob Bowen just sent me a text. I just hope you're getting treated all right. I am. But thanks for reaching out to Gina. He's going to be fine.
Good.
So that's
We're very
great
glad to hear
news.
that. I know the mayor has some questions, but I want to make sure the Councilman Garthwaite and then Councilman Donovan.
Neil, hi. Thank
Hi.
you so much for whittling down our budget over here because it really helps our residents and helps us do our job as well. I have a couple of questions, I believe, for Ann. My first question is, after this comes through, after all of this comes to fruition, I'm wondering, can we get this budget online someplace so that our residents have transparency?
You know, Melly, I apologize. We had promised the mayor that after our last budget, we were going to wait, and I think the last meeting was a couple of weeks ago. We are going to get it up. We're going to do our best to get it up online. By the way, it's a law. We should be doing it. It should have been done. It's something that we've mentioned that we went on vacation. I promise you we will get that done as soon as possible.
That would be great, because residents have asked for
Absolutely.
it, so that
No,
would be great.
you're right, and we're a little bit late on that.
Okay, and then I was hoping that we could get some maybe monthly financial updates
We'll give you, I think I said this to Chris today, whatever we give the board, we'll get it to you guys.
Okay.
And you're certainly welcome to attend
Yeah.
those meetings, and the next financial report will be we only have one meeting in April. It's going to be the second meeting of the month, so it'll be our second meeting in May. We'll get you something right after that.
Okay, so it would be, you could give it to Councilman Rivera, maybe monthly, hopefully.
Email's real easy. We'll get it. We'll get
Okay,
it to you.
that would be
So,
great.
He should be getting those. Are you getting those emails now?
Yeah, I'm getting some of the emails.
Okay.
Listen,
Make sure you get the same packet that we
and Pete, you know you can email me anytime. And
100%.
Yep. But that's easy enough. I mean, we should be getting it to you.
Okay, and then my last question is, I still think this is for Ann. How often do you have your finance meetings? How often is that happening right now?
Finance with the board.
Yes, yeah.
Remember, we just started in January with the new board. Kebby has given out the assignments. We've actually come up with, we're going to implement a new system, which is going to make most of our committees mandatory to meet on Mondays, first Monday of the month, and make sure that they can offer a report to the board. But, I'll leave that to Kebby if you have any other details.
I stole that idea from you guys after the last council meeting I was at, and how you guys meet at the beginning of your meeting, your committee, so we're gonna follow the same process with finance. Finance actually comes every month and we talk about it, but formally we'll be meeting our committee individually. We were a lot less formal with our board, would meet as a whole with pretty much every committee. We would talk about all those things, but I think having it in a formal process will be a little bit easier for people to follow if they're looking for stuff.
Kebby, could I ask that perhaps it might be public for our residents?
They are.
Yeah, they are. We're online.
But you'll keep that part of it?
As well, yep.
Yeah, okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilman Donovan?
Thank you. Just one last suggestion, I guess. It might have been suggested before, and I think it'll benefit everyone on the council and maybe yourself. Who puts out the booklets, the budgets?
Those booklets?
Yeah.
We print them out after the board passes its initial budget.
How about numbers on the pages? Just a suggestion.
Which number? The
Page 1, page 2, page 3.
Gary, that was my first thought when Chris asked the question. Yes.
We're on the same page.
Just, yeah, just because when he's talking about something.
Right, to refer. Yes.
Professionally wise, it looks like we're, all looking around and we don't know what's going on.
I agree. Yep.
So, thank you.
So I just want touch upon something that Councilman Garthwaite said, and I don't want to use the word transparency as if it implies that, folks on the Board of Education side are not being transparent. That is absolutely not the message I'm trying to send. Sitting up here, it's difficult to make a financial decision of this magnitude, millions and millions of dollars, without having the nitty-gritty backup that we get from the other departments. And I have to say that this year, I think, is the first year in my 2 years here, and I don't know about the others that have been on longer, that we've had that information, and it's very helpful because when we're being asked to possibly increase what the city is allocating, we need to understand why and where that money is going, and we understand and appreciate we don't have a say in that by law. We understand that, but just for us to kind of wrap our heads around that decision, it's important for us to understand what you all are doing with that. So I appreciate that level of detail this year, and I hope that we can work to increase that and continue. Just as a point of personal frustration that I had is finding out that 2025 ended in a position that we weren't really happy with so late in the process. And I think that with all these changes that Neil, you're making, Ann's making, that you're going to see this. Are you okay? Okay. Same dude. that you're going to see this come earlier, and then if you see that you're tracking high, then you can go to the mayor a little bit earlier, and then come to us a little bit earlier, and we don't just get slapped with a really large number, and the mayor doesn't have to lose a lot of sleepless nights trying to figure that out. And I think it just helps. It just helps everybody. So I think this is a great first couple of steps to get to where we need to be, and I hope that we use this as a springboard and continue on.
Believe me, I've had a lot of sleepless nights over this. We were given the impression that there were some options, which we later found out we couldn't use by the auditor, that would help us balance this year. So it was late. We are still pursuing that, that Alliance grant issue, which I think hurt us over a period of time, again, through no fault of anybody here in this room. And again, I think, you just keep doing things the same way until somebody else, so sometimes somebody got to say to you, try it this way, or when you do it, hand it in and include this or do that. And, I hope I don't want to ever give anybody the impression that we've been resistant. In other words, when somebody asks, do it this way or try to get it to us in a different format, we're going to do our best we can.
Yeah, and I've certainly never taken it that way, and it's like the old adage, just because it's the way it's always been done doesn't mean it's the right way to do it.
Chris, that's
And
exactly.
I'm sure you're all living that. Thank you again. Mayor, I know that you have a few follow-up things.
Yeah, yep. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for all your thoughtful questions. I thought I had all my questions answered when I went to the Board of Education meeting, when I heard all of you, but it generated new questions, so bear with me. So we talked about FQHC and Cornell. Can they help with the nurse situation if we're struggling to hire nurses?
Well, we
because
have the
there's a
school-based
shortage?
health centers that are open at the high school that do provide care to kids during the
Right.
course of the day.
Yeah, maybe if, I know it's not the same thing, but,
I was just gonna say, the school-based health centers provide a different type of care than the nurses
Kathy knows
in the
it. She's a
suites provide.
I can clarify if that.
Help-
Yeah,
have
no.
it.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, what they are is an outside clinic that's operating inside of our schools. So the services they're providing are not school nursing. It's as if they're going to their doctor or clinic for medical care. So they don't work as school nurses is really what it boils down to.
Got it.
So we work collaboratively. We refer students to them, but they have to enroll separately into their services.
Okay, so with us not using Bridges, so Bridges used Optimus, right? Were they subcontracting to Optimus?
Optimus was the medical school-based health center. Actually, I think it was Behavior as well, prior to Cornell Scott.
Okay, good, okay, because they're in Bridgeport, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if a child's so Optimus, it's very difficult to continue that care when
Yeah.
they don't have the transportation.
Yeah, the
So-
collaboration with Cornell Scott has been great because a lot of our students innately already, that is their primary
Yeah,
care provider.
they're
so
right in
It
town,
makes a lot of sense.
right? So
Yeah.
they could go and they don't need the transportation that some of our families struggle with. Okay, thank you. And then social workers, along that line, I actually had a discussion with the president of Southern, and they have a social worker intern program, and they have a part-time supervisor that oversees the program. Do we have any opportunity for maybe a partnership with intern social workers from Southern?
I just got the email from her today, and we set up a Zoom for next week.
Okay, great.
Michelle, I remember her name was Michelle,
Yeah.
but I'll have to look
And
through my
Sandra
emails.
Butler is the president, so.
You know, it would be really nice, see, what happens a lot of times is, if we can do it through the university, we would be able to get candidates and take them in on a much more regular basis. What we find, the ones we get are individuals say, look, I need a placement, or I need to do some hours, so this would actually really
Yeah.
help us out.
Yeah, we told them we have the room too, we could place them. Okay, great, I'm glad to hear that you connected with her. We just asked them yesterday, so that was fast. The copy center, my favorite thing to talk about, that copy center. Is it working? Because it shows that it's over budget by $298,000. So is it working to have this contract with them? Is this something maybe we could have students run our copy center? Because
Well,
What are we doing with
here's
the
what
copies?
here's what I'll tell you. They do a really good job. What it allows us to do is to monitor the number of copies being made. In other words, what we did at one time many years ago now, we pulled the machines out of the schools because you track the number of copies that were made. I don't want to say that we were doing, like Cub Scouts and other things, or 100 extra copies of this and that. So I think it allowed us to control the copies. The cost is again, I don't know how we're paying for the 290 shortfall. I don't know where we're transferring the money from, but we have reduced the number of copies. We went from, at one point right before COVID, 2 million copies. We make 2 million copies a month to 1 million. I think we're down to about 800,000, and we're able to push them a little bit. And one of our arguments is, geez, kids do a lot of work on computers now. There's not as much writing. There's smart boards. Many of the programs we buy include those kinds of things. They have been telling us that, their goal is to reduce copies too, because they have other ways now that Xerox makes money, because they know people aren't making as many copies. I haven't seen it. My fear is, though, when I take the copy center out, I'm going to have to buy, rent, and put a lot more machine power back in the school, and I don't know that we're going to save money. Again, I don't know if we'd still be $200,000 over. They're telling me it's still more cost-effective. They are. Again, they're Xerox, and they're running the copy center. They're telling me it's more cost-effective. I just don't know, but I would like to.
can we do that analysis this year?
Yeah, we can. We can.
help.
And one of the
Keith
things.
Fryer could help, he's the copy guru.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've done too is even the way they submit jobs, and we're trying to become more digitized and things like that. They're not the greatest people company to deal with. They're tough.
They're grumpy.
They're grumpy. Yeah, they are. They're grumpy, and you try to get them in a meeting with one room, but. And they show you all these statistics and whatnot. We're pushing them, but yes, we'll do our best. And again, I think we need to do the analysis once and for all.
Yeah.
Do we put the machines back in the schools, or do we maintain a copy center? And by the way, the new copy center is beautiful. If you guys need it, we're happy to.
And again, we do have that internal auditor, and she's very good and
Great.
helpful with operational auditing. It's not necessarily financial auditing, but operational auditor can walk into a scenario and kind of come up with efficiencies.
That's a really good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, so building security, do we charge back our resource officers to the building security line item?
We have Sparks, and then we have the SROs.
Yep.
And they are split between the general fund and a variety of grants.
Okay, so is it over budget? Wait, where was it? was over budget by $587,000. Now, we all know how important it is, and we don't want to reduce the security for our students, but what has driven that number up? Is it the number of events we have?
No,
Is it
the
an
inside
increase in
events,
their contract?
if we're running an event, we pay. Outside events, they pay.
Okay.
I think what's driving it is there are more guards, especially at the high school. So we have been paying attention, and we are trying to limit that and working, some of you may know, he's a West Haven guy, Jason Criscio, he's the head guy at West Haven High School, on reducing the number that we have during the course of the day. Mike and Joe have done a good job of reducing the number for athletic events, so we're trying to get that number down.
Well, they do an excellent job.
Oh, they're an excellent
And
company.
they're friendly.
No,
Not
they're,
like
they're a
Copy
really,
Center, they're friendly when you show up.
Dorinda,
wonderful.
they're a really good company, but again, I think what happened was based on when we put, and by the way, it's going out for RFP again.
Okay.
It's, we're actually putting that together right now. They just found in order to meet the qualifications of the bid, they didn't give us, all the companies that bid, the number of guards that we actually needed in order to make the building as secure as it could be.
Okay. So resource officers go into that line item as well?
I believe they come out of a grant,
Okay.
or at least partially out of a grant.
All right, so as salaries increase for the officers, you have to build that into the budget as well. So have you been tracking that
We have some,
Problem is, we haven't received a bill yet.
and we do get some, there are some
from
discrepancies.
us?
No, from the, well, from the police department, but here's what I can tell you. Traditionally, we have some discrepancies with them because, they work different hours, different shifts. We work 180 days. My opinion, although, again, the police are so good to us, we try not to argue. I think we're getting overcharged for the number of days they work. Now, they do work some of our events, and the resource officers will cover a rink or something. I don't believe they charge us, but I think it's very expensive. And, again, not that the officer, we had a female officer at Bailey this year who was out on maternity leave. And so and one thing I'm sure is Taryn Drine, we will get the number of days that person worked, but we don't want to overpay for days where we didn't get the service. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at. And, one of the things that, and again, it's kind of in line because it all goes to salary and coverage and things like that. Like, one of the officers, to me, if you take that job, I know they have union contracts, but when you bid a school job, you shouldn't be able to go to Florida and be out of school for a week. And I think those are the kinds of things that concern me. In fact, one of the things that we haven't done, just because we have such a good relationship, but we're looking at, by law, there's supposed to be an agreement between the police department and the Board of Ed each year on those, and those are the kinds of things I would like to see written into a contract, which would allow us for more accurate building and making sure that we're getting the coverage that we're paying for. Here's a stupid example, but what do they do on a snow day? And now eventually they got to make it up, but are they working somewhere else? Or I don't know.
Well, my personal opinion, you could never replace the value of a police officer in the school because they get to know the kids and they're the same officers that are on the street.
You're 100% correct.
And they know those students, right? They know the students that are good, they know the students that may be a problem.
And they know what's going on outside the school.
Right,
too.
when they're in the school, they get to know the students, and then when they're out in the community, they know them, and vice versa. So I think, they're extremely valuable. What I was really getting at is our events that we have, because we talked a little bit about revenue. So that's why I was asking about building security. If we were charging enough for these events, we have a state-of-the-art high school. We do charge for custodial, and we charge for security, but are we doing like a profit and loss analysis to make sure we're charging outside of West Haven enough money to cover?
The security company recommended, now again, I don't get involved, that we pay about $30 an hour for a guard. They said for an outside event, it's typical to charge $50 an hour, so we do make over and above. I don't know if we charge the full 50, Mike could. Yeah, so we do make money off an outside event.
Oh, we make it off of somebody outside of the.
They're paying the full $50.
Rent.
We're getting the
Okay.
full $50. I mean, they're paying us for the service, but the company's getting 30 and we're making a $20 profit.
Okay, all right, okay. So we're making money on renting all of our beautiful facilities that we invested in that. Okay, great. Well, that's good to know.
We're not breaking the bank, but we're
Yeah,
doing
no, I
okay.
thought building security maybe went up because we have such great facilities and now everybody was using them.
No,
so-
they pay.
Okay, that's great.
The only thing is we do run a lot of, again, it's a high school, the play, we're paying for that. Band concerts, we're paying for, those are our facilities and
Yeah, we
sporting
don't wanna
event,
charge
obviously.
we don't want to charge our.
But we are trying to cut down on the after school, like in other words, like we cut way back for our spring sports outdoor. We may have one guard now watching 2 or 3 events, so we are trying to watch it. It's expensive, but the other thing, and you know this because you kind of alluded to it before, there's nothing like a resource officer with the police uniform and the badge and, unfortunately, the gun. But they command respect. They know the kids. Our security guards are also pretty valuable. They get to know the kids well if they're stationed, if they're the same one stationed. And again, these guys are pretty good. They do pay their guys a little bit more, but I think we're getting a better service.
Yeah, no, it is, it's a good service.
Yep.
Um,
How do you cut back? Or, you got to be
Yeah.
careful when you cut back without,
Yeah, no, and I wasn't suggesting.
No,
cutting
I
back.
know
was
you're
just
not, but
trying
I'm
to
just
figure
saying,
out
we
what
are,
the-
but
what
we're
was
trying to do it in a
driving
way
it,
that
yeah.
doesn't,
And actually, good news, I don't know. I was at SCROG today, so that's, the 19 mayors, and we
Mhm.
have a congressional report that's provided to us, and they're kind of close, at the federal level of passing the Homeland Security bill, and that is the request that Ricky Fontana and our grant writer Olivia and I and Ricky have worked on for 2 years now to get school security funding. Excuse me, so it's $2.5 million. So we've been waiting on this for several months and we're getting close, and that would be amazing to have because that would put the cameras like we have in the high school in all of our schools.
I know Rick's been working on that. And
I
we've,
know.
you know, we've,
I know.
We've,
It's a
Chris,
struggle,
worked with
but-
Chris and our guys, and
Yeah.
we've,
But, the newer schools have it, but, I don't, yeah, okay. Student activity fund, you mentioned that who manages a student activity fund account?
those are managed by the individual schools, but now I think Ann has set up a system now.
Yeah, so each school has, it's usually the principal and the school secretary manage that. At the high school, we actually have a consultant that does our bookkeeping. We have a bookkeeper, an outside service, and she's phenomenal. Her books are spot on. Everything's really ticked and tied, and she's phenomenal. We've gone through our student activity accounts for last year, and we were actually just constructing today spreadsheets by month that they can complete, fill out, reconcile to their bank, and to make it as seamless as possible, so that they're keeping track of it. And they send all of their backup to central office at the end of the year. So we have all of that. We have every receipt. We have paper.
So you have controls in place?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because that was a external audit comment about the Board of Education in the past, the controls over student activity fund. So you have those controls in place? You're comfortable?
I believe Floyd did a presentation last year. And
Rules, regulations.
Okay, okay.
What can be used with those funds, what can't be used. In other words, it's a student activity fund. The money's got to be spent on the students. You take the money in. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. The 8 schools are pretty easy. It's a field trip. You're putting the money in. They raise money. The high school, it's like its own little bank. Between a lot of the booster clubs are in there. Class reunions, which we were told by our attorney, after 5 years, they shouldn't have any money in there. So we're trying to clean those accounts out. One of the things that we say is, while the bookkeeper, Ann is right, does a great job, we really, we've asked for, if we've instituted a sign off by the administrator to make sure, because the bookkeeper is just keeping the books, the money's going in. We want to make sure, yes, this is what the money's being used for, and this is what we're putting it in, and then we're going to, most of the time it goes in, it goes out. But the high school, there's a lot of money with all of the activities and clubs and things that take place there that go on there. Drama, for example, which is a big one. They take in a lot of revenue.
Yeah. And when we ask these questions, it's not that not that the city side didn't have all of these challenges. So we found miscellaneous accounts everywhere. Senior accounts, different accounts that there was money in them and they weren't used for 6 years. And and that's how we've been able actually to do some of the things we do, because we found all these accounts with money in them that I don't know.
Listen, there's nothing you've asked or said that have,
We've gone through all this, so when we ask these questions, only we're coming from experience. We had to clean up quite a mess ourselves. So we feel your pain.
And we've done a lot with, I can tell you, and some of the details with that student activity account last year in particular. So, and we appreciate the work, your suggestion on the auditor really helped us out.
Our auditor will come in and help you with whatever you need. And I'm glad to hear that you're going to look to augment the finance department, because when you kept saying we, I was thinking, who's we, Kimasabi? Because I don't know who else is helping you, but you need help, because you can't, a little mouse in a pie, you can't do this alone. And a lot of the questions around the budgeting process, I'm not going to beat a dead horse because several council members mentioned it, and I know you don't want to change course midstream because you just picked up this budget, and last year someone else did the budget. But for the next year, for fiscal year 28, and we will help you however we can, you have to put numbers in these budget line items. You can't budget a zero, because then, to everybody's point, you can't track, your budget. And you may have these other balance sheets and these other spreadsheets that you're keeping, so you keep track, but everybody else got to see that too, right? So because all we see is, custodial supplies budgeted at zero. We know that's not the case, right? Or equipment or operation plant, it'll be budgeted at zero. Expended to date, $230,000, another $343 expected, $575,000 overage. When you look at that, that's very scary. You may have a separate spreadsheet that's tracking all that. We need to see that so we have comfort in, and you need to know, so you know what to budget next year for those line items.
And that's what the finance committee
Yes.
will be doing, because the budget is the board's budget, and we'll work through how they wish to create their budget and what they want to see.
Yeah, you got a lot of work this summer. And
There's
again,
always a lot of
I'll
work.
keep saying, we're here to help. You already touched on ACES and Noble Street, so hopefully we'll get together in the next maybe 2 weeks and talk about
I
it.
think we have a meeting scheduled
Okay, oh, yes, we do, I'm sorry.
next
We
week.
do have the meeting schedule, okay. Talked about special education, your insurance numbers, does that include the retirees in there?
Yes.
Okay, it does have that.
Yeah, the number actually, we got a 9-something%, and I think Rick said, with the retirees, it was 10.3. So
yeah.
yes.
It was helpful, to get those numbers for the city side as well, to get a reduced health insurance. Our stop loss went up though, so I don't know
Yes.
if you're looking at stop loss.
Lockton was supposed to be putting together a full package of what
We just got the city side and it was a jump.
no, the stop loss, yes, they were supposed to be putting together their projection for next year, the
Okay.
updated, and I have yet to get it.
Okay. Food services, is there something in their contract that says if a school has an event that they have to provide the food?
No, they're pretty good about that.
Okay, all right. I mean, she does a wonderful job, but they're a little pricey. Right? A little pricey.
Nobody makes them, most of the time they go to them because they're better than an outside vendor,
Okay.
or it's convenient, but no, there's nothing that says they have to do it.
Okay. I just want to make sure the flexibility is there. And then I just looked up, Councilwoman Tucker was asking about transfers, and, the policy is that the Board of Education, under circumstances, can transfer, from time to time. All transfers made in these instances can be made ahead of time, but need to be announced at the next regularly scheduled board meeting with a written explanation of the transfer, and that explanation needs to be sent to the council as well. So anytime there's a transfer, you can make it ahead of time. So what Kathy was referring to is the city can't make the transfers without going to the council first. Board of Education is different. You can make the transfers, but you have to report that you made
Yeah,
the
I thought I said, I apologize if I didn't.
No, you did say that.
Okay.
I was just confirming.
I did say, but it could have been me or the way.
Yep.
I apologize.
And then,
Transfers were done after the board approved them.
okay. And then just a reminder that all contracts over $35,000, we changed the threshold. Everything under $35,000, if it's a product or a service, needs to go to bid. And if it's between 10 and 35, we need to get 3 quotes, and we just need to document those quotes. We just need to, make sure we cross our Ts and dot our Is and we don't find ourselves. And then the contracts need to go before the city council as well.
I think the misconception is that we don't sign contracts.
Right.
The big contracts all either go through the city, obviously all go through your purchasing. We obviously get to say, this is what we need, and the RFP is put out. We give a recommendation, but ultimately,
We approve the recommendation for the contracts to go to the council.
not even that necessarily. But it's the council. It's the council is the official body that approves the contract. Winklevoss, the big ones.
Yeah.
Spark Security. I'm not sure about Sodexo, and the only reason I say that is because the food service contracts have to be approved by the State Department of Education, and even though we put out a 5-year bid, it's technically 5 one-year bids. So I'm not exactly sure how that technically works, but that would be the one. And they charge a monthly fee, and then we get the profit. So we make money off that.
Okay. Hang on 1 second. So we put a new control in place where, if an invoice goes to the finance department, it's triggered tied to the contract, and the contract has to have the bid approval on it. So, nobody can send an invoice to the finance department to be paid without having, it's in the system that it went to bid and there's a contract. So we have that on.
Yeah, but everything we do has to go through your finance. Again, I don't know the system, but I have to believe that would include us, and it would be triggered as well.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
We have a
good.
new control in place.
No, I'm saying, I didn't know if we had to do something different on our own, or if it would just
Yep.
happen upstairs when it went to
No,
finance.
so if a bill comes to us now, on the city side as well, in the system, it has to demonstrate that it either went to bid or somebody signed off that the quotes are there. Make sense? Okay. All right, and lastly, I know we've said this, and I know we've talked about this as a nice to have, and I know you agreed to do it, but as mayor, I'd be remiss if I did not say it, that, the budget does need to be online, and the budget to actual does need to come to the mayor quarterly. That's not a nice to have, that's required by charter and required by law, that we receive those. And I know you committed to doing it, but I have to make sure I emphasize that, because that's important for us to be able to track. And I don't want to leave on that note. Let's see, what can I ask that's nice?
No, but I think you've been, again, I think we've made that effort, but we will get it up online.
I know. Yep,
Listen,
but it's also
it is what it is, and we've got to do it.
Yep, and I know, this whole entire process, this budget this year, I think we all took a step back, and we all know how we're gonna improve our processes on the city side and on the Board of Education side. And as I opened and stated, that's only gonna make us very strong as a city. That's gonna make us in compliance, and it's gonna make sure we have controls in place and separation of duties, and we're on a good path going forward. And I think that's what we all want, because we all want to make sure that the funds are spent where they could be best used to help our students. So with that, I really thank you. And Ann, again, thank you for stepping up and working so hard on organizing the finances. And I know you've been working with the city, and we're here to help. And what else we got? Anything else?
And just know that we're available as well, too. I mean, you know, shoot us an email if there's questions. Again, Chris,
Oh,
I
you
think
know
Chris
we
would
will.
confirm. We get back pretty
You do.
quickly
You're
and
very responsive.
try to get you the information you guys need.
And thank you to everybody who stuck it out tonight, and for all you do for West Haven. We appreciate it. We want to make sure you know how much we value you.
If the mayor's all set, I just want to make sure, council, you're all set with your questions. Everybody's good? Councilman Ronan, all set? No, you're good? Everybody's good? Everybody good? Everybody, thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you for all the hard work. Motion to adjourn? Second, third, fourth. Good night.